Monsters, creatures, legends. You know them. You slay them. But do you ever get to play them? Sure, defeating a giant in single combat, solving a sphinx's riddle, or even outwitting a devil is a lot of fun. But what if you were the giant, sphinx, or devil? What if you could become the monster? Well, now you can. Continuing the tradition of Year of Monsters, Roll for Combat is proud to present the Year of Legends. Every month, you'll receive a new legendary creature that you can play as a character for either 5e or Pathfinder. Now you too can play as a fallen angel, a stony gargoyle, a brain-eating seraphage, an ocular evil eye, a towering giant, a teeming swarmblood, a moon-blessed were-creature, a tree-like arboreal, a miraculous golem-born, an accursed lamia, an ominous psychopomp, or a riddling sphinx. You can get all this for less than a cup of coffee every month. But don't delay. If you back the Year of Legends Kickstarter now, you'll receive Devils, a bonus 13th ancestry at the start of the new year. These infernal creatures from hell are the perfect complement to January's other ancestry, Angels. If you back the Kickstarter today, you'll receive both Devils and Angels to kick off 2024. Otherwise, you'll have to wait until 2025 for the Devils to appear. So, won't you give monster characters a chance? Back the Year of Legends today.
Hello, we are live. I didn't even brush my hair because I'm so busy. Look what we got today. We got Discourse Minis.
Hey,
she's in space.
Yeah, I am. That's where I live. It's basically where I come from. Yeah.
Really? That's
cool. Not Ireland. That's a lie. I'm actually from space.
Well, so I thought Ireland is filled with space people. Space people and leprechauns. Darn leprechauns.
Depends where you go. Oh no, we're not bringing up Dalriada again, are we?
No. Okay. I've never been there. I've always wanted to go.
Ireland or space? Which one?
Both.
Oh yeah.
But I think Ireland's probably a little easier to get to right now.
Yeah, probably. It's really small, I think, for like Americans and like Canadians. Ireland is tiny, but for me, it's huge. It's a massive island, labyrinthine. Takes hours to travel across. Hours.
Yeah. Well, that's what people say because when I've been to Europe a lot, and they're always like, "Oh yeah, it takes so many hours to get somewhere," and to us, it's like that's like a state, It's like, and then my friends who would come here, and they were always like, "Oh my God, this country is so big." And I was like, "Yeah, I guess. I don't know. I never really think about it. It is huge. It is huge, especially when you start driving around and go to different places, different cities, and you're just like, all these people, and they just live here, and it's just like it's crazy."
I've heard though, you've got lots of wilderness. That's something that we don't have. Wilderness, properly, you can just go out. Everywhere here, you're always you can see a house. No matter where you are, if you kind of peer through the trees, you can see a house. But I don't think that's true in America.
Yeah, well, in the West, I was in Arizona, and in Arizona, we drove from the bottom to the very top, and in Arizona, there's places where there is nothing. It is, and it's flat, and you can see for miles in every direction, and it's just mountains and rocks, and that's it. And there is no civilization for hundreds of miles in any direction. And I was thinking, man, if you get stuck here, you are dead. It's a little scary.
Sounds brilliant. It sounds honestly, I've always wanted. I've never been to America. I've been once. But it was to Disneyland, so I don't know if it counts.
No,
but I've always wanted to do a road trip, from one end of the country to the other, Route 66, go all the way across, east to west coast. That'd be that's my bucket list, right?
Yeah, when you get to I drove across America, and once you get past the Rockies, it really gets empty, like scary empty. Like you're like, oh, because you think there's always like a town or something, but when you get that far out, it's like there's just nothing for miles, forever, and you're just like, wow. And that got now we have cell phones, but once I was in Utah back in like the 90s and we got lost, and I remember there was a lot of cows, and I was just like and we couldn't like figure out where we were on the map, and I was like, and it was getting dark, and I was like, oh my god, man, we are going to die. I was like, I don't know where we are, and thank
nightmares
God.
of cows for the rest of your life, you know.
Well, we found it was we were going to Jackson Hole, Wyoming, and it was just totally in the middle of nowhere. So anyhow, we found it, but it was very scary. Anyhow.
Looks like Baron's in the chat and said, let me in the chat, send me a Zoom.
Oh, Baron?
Yeah.
Oh,
see him? He's up there.
He said he couldn't make it.
Yeah, and now he said he's getting out of the meeting early.
I told you that you can make it today, Baron DeGroff.
Hold up. Am I your second choice? You asked Baron, he says no. Let's go to Discourse then.
No,
second
you were
bet.
my first
Silver
choice.
medal. Oh,
no,
great.
I always ask multiple people. Well, he went away.
He asked multiple at the same time.
I always ask multiple. No, I would have had both on, but no, he went away to a convention that I was going to go to last weekend, and I wanted to ask. I've never been to it, and I wanted to see what it was like. And then I'm like, oh, you're around? Because this is probably a topic you'd like to talk about. But he's like, oh, I got to work. And I was like, okay, well, then you're going to go work.
I was so flattered, chat. I was so flattered when I was like, oh my goodness, on Roll for Combat? Me? Of course.
I mean, yeah, you were our first and only choice. Baron just has he has a standing
Baron
invitation.
Says no.
He can come on whenever he wants. Baron, if you're really getting out early, let me know. I'll see what I can do.
He is. He said send him a Zoom that he's really getting out early.
I still don't believe you. I gotta
think he's making it up? All right.
I don't.
I also saw that Steel Mongoose has maybe guessed at this like secret ending of some of the stuff about what happened with the breakup in the chat. So that'll be interesting when we get to it.
Now I gotta make a whole new layout. We'll see. Hold on. I gotta.
You have a 4-person layout.
No,
I know you do.
Don't.
No, really?
Well, I redid the layouts for my.
Oh, you don't have a redone version of it.
Yeah.
Just knock me off. I'll go audio only. We all know what you want. Yeah.
I'll do it. All right, let me do my little spiel, and then I'll see if I can get him on. So, first of all, welcome, Discourse Minis. We never know your real name, so we'll just call you Mini.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is acceptable.
That is acceptable. Everyone's excited to see you. I love watching your videos. They're so fun and excitable, and you are one of the only other people who really covers the business side like we do. So I do like watching your videos.
Oh, thanks. That's awesome.
And I especially like watching you cover the same stuff we do, and you get 1,000% more views than I do. And
I like watching that too.
I'm sure she does too.
The trick is to just use a thumbnail of you with your hand on your head.
Works
every time.
Swear to God, the thumbnail with you like this, and then the arrow going down. I'm like, damn it! I'm gonna use that next time. That's the thumbnail to use. It's the arrow going down.
Yeah.
One.
The algorithm is a great and terrible god. You just got to give it what it wants and ask no questions. Ask no questions.
I know that. But we have a couple things. First of all, we still have the legendary races and ancestries, the Year of Legends going on right now. If you guys want to check it out. And we have... So I'll tell you what we're doing, because you actually didn't know about this, Discourse Mini, is that because we were saying about it, is that we are doing this and it is all digital, and we have. So Mark, do you want to give the overview while I try to see if I can give
overview of what this is? It's Year of Legends. If you haven't heard about it from our other streams, every month you will get a new ancestry / species / race, whatever you want to call them, for Pathfinder 2nd Edition or 5e or both. If you want to pledge for both, it's at a steep discount over buying them both separately. So every month in your inbox, you can get angels, and then after angels, you can get evil eyes, which are like floating eyes that can shoot out beams and do curses on people, and sphinxes, and gargoyles, were creatures, lamia, giants, golemborn, swarmblood, psychopomps, cerebrophages, and arboreals. So that is basically what the Kickstarter is for. These are long ancestry/species/races. They have lots of lore. The 5e versions have backgrounds, which is part of what makes them lengthy and have a lot of content. And they really let you dig in and role play as that character rather than just being kind of one and done in a couple pages. So that's what it is.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing it online. We have this thing where I made animated tokens, which I don't think anyone's really done for all the ancestries. So when you use it online, you get animated. And the angels came in because I didn't know how many animated tokens I was going to do. There's 32 animated tokens for one ancestry, just one. So that's doing the math. It's something like 360 animated tokens. So you get 13 ancestries or races. They're all gigantic. They're all very cool and complex and things you won't find anywhere else. You'll get to hang out with us if you have questions about them. You'll get these animated tokens. You'll get regular tokens too, not just the non-animated ones. You get the PDF and you can get the Foundry module. And yeah, and next month, while I continue doing this, why don't you tell Discourse Mini about the craziest ancestry ever created? Because people are like, whatever, we can play.
I don't know. The dungeon may actually be wilder of an idea that you are a literal incarnation of a dungeon. But in terms of the rules mechanics, being an intelligent weapon was much harder to implement than being a dungeon.
Yes. Like you're an actual weapon? Like you're an intelligent, like you're somebody's sword?
Yes.
Being a weapon was much harder to implement than being a dungeon in terms of the number of rules corner cases, due to the fact that when you're a dungeon, they're like, that's fine, you're a dungeon. Like, that's separate. You have an avatar and you're kind of doing your own thing. But when you're a weapon, unfortunately or fortunately, like the fact that your weapon is highly relevant at all points in time. And so therefore there are tons of like little small things that you have to take into account depending on exactly what you're doing with the weapon. So we've got intelligent weapons coming up in December, which even one of the people who helps us get up the Path Builder character creation files admitted, he was like, you know what, until I saw this file today, I literally didn't think the concept would be usable. And so this might be some of your best work, Mark, is what they said about it.
Nice.
Yes. So you will play a weapon. And we have all these edge cases, like you can play a spoon. You can play
yes.
You can be like a relic. You can be whatever you think. Anything crazy you can think of, you can be. So
you're saying it was a compliment when I was called a spoon before. So you're saying like that's a compliment I received, right?
Yeah. I mean, it was saying you were an intelligent weapon.
Yeah.
So
yes,
that
exactly.
means you must be very intelligent.
Awesome. Yeah. All my commenters, thanks very much. All the
There you
commenters.
go.
Did I call you a spoon or someone else called you a spoon?
No, a commenter apparently did.
Do you play as just the weapon? Does someone have to carry you around, or do you like float around? And
you can
normally
either one.
Yeah, normally you will choose between being an animated weapon that's just floating around and slashing, a projecting weapon where you just kind of project like a body to carry you, or possessing where you're like possessing like a kind of an empty clone or something like that or something. And then the fourth one, which is symbiotic, where there's like some noob who maybe thinks they're doing it by themselves, but you're kind of just making them really good at combat. And they're actually just a complete noob turnip farmer, and but they just win in fights because the weapon's actually doing everything.
That's funny. So I've played that character before, but I've always played it as like the kind of person, like wielding the sword, like that's how I'm role playing. So it's a really interesting idea to actually be the weapon itself. Yeah. Probably the more experienced character in the two, yeah.
And then we have a section at the end that says, look, okay, these let you actually play and you have agency to do what you want to do. But what if you didn't want agency? What if you just wanted like some other person to use you who's one of the other players, and you can't move. You're not a wizard or a fighter or something. They're the wizard or the fighter. You are just the weapon. So we have a little bit at the end that's like, okay, so you can still use some of the feats from this book in combination with these other item choices and then play the item as well if you want. We recommend playing as an actual characters because you can do everything if you do that, but some people didn't want that. They just want to be the fighter's sword.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. No, that sounds like a lot of fun. That sounds really cool.
All right.
Okay.
Oh, wait.
So let's get to this. This is a really...
Wait, I think I can actually get him in.
Oh, you can get Baron. Okay.
I know.
This is a really interesting topic, and I'd like to hear Baron's take on it if this works.
Let's see. You know, the last time I had to do this, you know who I had to let in at the last second? Baron.
Seems like.
Do you know Baron DeGroff? Do you know him, Discourse?
I do. Yeah, I'm actually I'm a fan of his.
Okay,
I'm a fan of his. I like his content.
You're about to meet him.
And his geopolitical D&D theories.
Good. Well,
yeah.
This is going to get interesting. All right, here we go. The surprise guest. He's like, he yelled at me. I have 6 messages. Where's my link? Get me in. Let me in.
Link?
No, literally, he says, let me in. Oh my God, just stop it.
I want chat to know I waited patiently for my link.
He said, he says, I'm joining now. He's making fun of us. All right, all right. Hold on. Let's see. Where is he? He's taking forever. Sorry to do this to you, but I think this will be good. And Mark and I will probably be quiet to let you guys discuss this more than us, because that's the only problem when you get 4 people in, is that it gets a little crowded. Where is he? He's like, I'm joining now. He's like, I'm joining now. Joining now. Where is he? Where are you, man? Up there he is. All right, let me let him in. I'm going to have to redo the layout. Look what he did. Look what he did. Look what you did. Oh my God, it worked perfectly. How did that happen? Except Baron is really big. Let me make you smaller.
He's here.
Hey.
Can you hear me?
Yeah,
is it
we
working?
Can hear you. We can hear you.
Is the audio quality half decent?
It's half decent, only half, not all the way decent though.
Oh.
I'm kidding. So you decided to join us the last second. Thanks, man.
Yeah.
Calling in from Earth, I see.
I am.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yin and yang.
Earth and space.
Oh, yeah, that's right. You have you have Earth back there.
Yeah.
Earth
let's go the other way. There we go. Now it's straight.
I had to throw this layout together very quickly, so hopefully this isn't like crowding out too many people. I like to put my little friends on the side. I got a little dragon for you, Baron. Discourse, you got a dragon too. Look at you. I know.
Yeah.
I got the evil eye, the investigator evil eye over there. All right, let's get to it. Once again, if you have any questions, now's the time. We have one super chat. How do you like the Rules Lawyers 2E game? Is that the Baron or Discourse?
Lawyers?
Who's in
Is that to
game?
me? I am in the Rules Lawyers. I'm in one of the Pathfinder 2 game.
Yeah,
and it's actually the first time I've ever played Pathfinder 2nd edition.
Oh.
And I'm having a lot of fun. I've really enjoyed it. I've really enjoyed the options and the amount of options, the endless options that there are. It's made for some really interesting characters. Yeah, so I'm having a blast. I just wish we got to play it more often. But everyone, it's a bunch of content creators, so like trying to get the schedules together. It's so tricky.
Well, you know who you have to blame for all those options. You're looking at the guy right here. You can yell at Mark.
Yeah, if it's too much, then it's probably my fault.
It's all your fault, Mark.
I mean, it's a lot of people's fault, but I can cop to the fact that sometimes I would put in things that were too much, and some of the other designers would be like, let's put in things that are less. Like, for example, when I was writing the variant rules chapter for the game mastery guide, I didn't think of the idea of the simplified skills where you just take out skill feats and have fewer feats. I thought of the ones where you add more feats and have more choices. One of the other designers was like, well, some people, that's too many feats to choose. So it's easier if you just simplify it so they have fewer choices to take. And that was a good point. So we put it in there. Of course, it wasn't as popular because people like to pick the ones that make them more powerful also. But I think for some groups, it probably really helped them. So yeah, it might be my fault if it has a lot of options.
So no, it's great. It's been a blast. I've been really enjoying it.
Well, if you ever have any, complaints, you know where to find Mark. You can just...
Good to know. Good to know.
It's always fun. It's one of my favorite things is I could always yell at Mark whenever there's a thing in Pathfinder I don't like. All right. So here's the topic du jour. Let me make a note of this. What time is it?
Yeah, I'm gonna write on my noteboard. I'm taking notes on my whiteboard. You can't see it, chat, but it's right over here.
You're making notes? Oh, damn!
Just in case. I don't know.
I've got a paintbrush. Can I paint my notes?
There
Am I
you
allowed
go.
to do that?
I'm just prepared to take notes. That's all.
So what's happening is that at the end of 2024, Penguin Random House is no longer going to be distributing WoTC's books, which is basically Dungeons and Dragons. And a lot of people in the space were actually a little upset about this because Penguin Random House is one of the largest, if not the largest distributor. And they also had a lot of pretty good rules and payment options and payment plans. And, they were a pretty good distributor and a lot of people liked using them. And it just kind of came and went. And it turned out like, it's like, okay, well, WoTC's just going to distribute themselves, or they're going to use people like Alliance or Diamond. There's a lot of these distributors out there. I myself use a couple. So the distributors basically take 10%. So the way it works is that the bookstore will sell it for 50%. And so, if it's a $50 book, the bookstore gets $25 and you get $25, but the distributor also gets 10% of that. So they'll get $250. And then there's usually some extra fees in there for like warehousing and advertising and all that stuff. So in the end, you as the developer usually get about 35%, maybe 40, somewhere between 40 to 35%. So that is, gives you an idea of how little money you really make on these books. You're thinking, oh, $50 book, they're making $50. It's like, no, they're making $17. That's what they make. Maybe. Yeah.
Maybe.
You're right.
And after cost of sales, like per production and shipping, that's another, $2 per book? Something like that?
Oh, at least. Yeah. So in the end, they're making just a couple dollars per book.
Yeah. I mean, we're talking cheap glue bounds that they sell, so it's only $2.
So the other thing is that keep in mind is that by getting rid of the distributor, they don't have to pay that 10% or 15%. And WoTC does have the ability to distribute themselves because they do a lot of the board games and their toys themselves. So they do have this capability. They're not, they're not some small time distributor out there. So
Stephen, you're saying that the price could go lower then? They're going to lower the price then?
That's right.
Awesome.
It could.
Sick,
It could.
cool.
Right.
It could
Nice.
go lower. They're going to pass those savings on to you.
That's cute.
Anyhow, so earlier this week or last week, or no, that was last week. So I myself have been trying to get into, I signed a deal and my books are now in big box stores and we're doing pretty well. And my books being the Battlezoo books. And we're actually trying to get into Barnes and Noble. And, we're not in the really big box stores like the Targets and Walmarts because the problem with those is that you have to, anything that doesn't sell, you have to buy back. So it's very risky to go into those stores because you can literally, they'll order, I'll say 5,000 books, and you would literally have to send them 5,000 books. And if they sell 200 books, well, then you got to buy back your 4,800 books. And boy, you did not make any money in that case. So you got to be really confident and know what you're doing if you're going to sell to those type of stores. And it's very risky to sell to those type of stores. So, someone like me can't do that. But, the Barnes and Nobles of the world, which I'd say mid-sized big box stores, you could sell to because they'll buy and they'll keep it. They really won't care. They won't return it. They'll buy your books and then keep the books until they're sold. And I was having trouble getting into these stores. And I was saying, what's going on? Why can't we seem to get into Barnes & Noble? And then the people I was talking to, which I talked to more than one about this, they said, well, you know that WoTC screwed you. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about? They're like, oh, you don't know? And I was like, no, I don't know. And they said, well, let me tell you a little story of what I heard. And that's, during the pandemic, when D&D was thriving and everyone was buying D&D like left and right, and of course people were buying D&D, people were watching Stranger Things, people were watching Critical Role, and this was even before the pandemic. This wasn't just a pandemic, but it definitely helped, is that D&D was doing great, and people like Barnes & Noble were buying up a lot of these books. And the thing is, Barnes & Noble doesn't really return these books. They buy them and keep them. So they have to be very careful with what they buy. And they were buying up a lot because the sales were really good. But then, suddenly, after the pandemic ended, for whatever reason, from what I heard, is that the books were overbought and not selling so great. Yes, the Player's Guide consistently sells well. It sells about 3,000 copies a week domestically, every week. The DM's Guide sells about 900 copies a week domestically, but some of their other books are only selling, 1, 2, 3, maybe 400 copies a week, which is the entire United States, including Amazon, including Barnes & Noble, all that stuff. Oof. And what's taking over these bookstores is manga. Like, manga is the king. The books are very cheap. They take very little space. You can pack them in there, and people are buying them by the truckload, and it's like not as much risk. And it's a combination of a lot of factors. And they said that the stores like Barnes and Noble are a little scared right now to buy TTRPGs and stock them because they kind of got burned. And then they also said that supposedly what they heard is that, well, they weren't sure who fired who. Was it WoTC who got rid of Penguin, or was it Penguin who got rid of WoTC because they weren't selling as much and doing as well, and maybe they had better terms? And to be honest, these things happen all the time. Is that, these companies will want to save face, so they'll put out general press releases to just say, oh yeah, we're not, like, we aren't using, we being WoTC, we're not going to be using Penguin anymore. But who knows? I mean, it could have been the other way around, but they're letting them save face. Why, Penguin doesn't care. It doesn't look good for either. It's bad business for either of them to say that, like Penguin got rid of WoTC. No one wants to say that. But from what I've been hearing and what I've been seeing with the sales is that, yes, of course, the core rules are going to do really well, and everyone seems to buy those, but it's the supporting books, which were taking up the space, that weren't really doing well, and they were spending a lot of time and effort to get these books in and taking up a lot of shelf space. Well, yes, of course we're going to get the core books, and of course you'll still find those in Barnes & Noble and all these other stores, but I don't know how much you're going to be finding the other books, the support books, the adventures, and so forth. And that is an interesting take, because that can spell a bit of doom and gloom for WoTC. And if you look at the quarterly report, and we were talking about this a couple weeks ago, if you look at this, and I'll let you guys talk in a second, I'm just giving the general overview. Wizards for the entire year, Wizards Tabletop, which includes Magic the Gathering and Dungeons and Dragons, and quote, other games, the physical books are up 1% for the entire year. 1% for 2023. Now, we know that Magic did great this year, and it's been doing great basically because of Lord of the Rings. So if they're up 1% for the year, and Magic is doing great, then something is not doing so great, and it's not Magic, so that means it's D&D, because 1%, if one person's doing great, something's pulling it down. And digital, which is Magic the Gathering Arena and D&D Beyond, is up 3% this year. And once again, they themselves have been saying Magic's doing great, but they're only up 3% from last year. So I wonder if those D&D Beyond cancellations started to kick in and really slam into them. By the way, this does not include Monopoly Go, and this does not include Baldur's Gate 3. That's digital game licenses. That's up 23% for the quarter and 7% for the year. That's separate.
It's none of the digital stuff, right? It's the physical tabletop.
No,
products.
1% is physical and 3% is digital for the year.
Okay.
And so that's it. So long story short, they're only up approximately 1 to 3% for Magic and D&D for the year. And they've been saying how great Magic is, and I think Magic's up something like 20% this year. So
Yeah.
you can figure out the math of where things are going, and something's pulling them down, and it ain't Magic. Go.
In fairness to WoTC, like I would expect D&D sales to be down this year, considering the growth that it had compared over the last couple of years. Like it was unprecedented, the amount of growth that they got across like COVID. So you would kind of expect it to be done. It's not like, I don't think that's like the craziest thing in terms of the book sales though. Like just generally speaking, I think their problem is that they're not releasing good books. Like I think that's actually just because I bet there are books that sell better than others. Like I bet that like Volo's Guide and Tasha's Guide, like the kind of like the expansion content where they add a whole bunch of new stuff. I bet those sell well because those are books that actually people want, but they sell so many niche products now, like Planescape and these kind of adventures set in like hell and stuff. Like there's just so many random products that they pump out these days. Like I'm not surprised that people don't buy them.
Yeah, I mean, I got in trouble by talking about this, so I'm going to give general numbers because I do have access to things. But supposedly Tasha is selling approximately, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything is about 400 to 500 copies a week. Some weeks better, some weeks I've seen
half as much as the DMG.
Well, the player's handbook, the core rule book, that's in like I think the top 100 selling Amazon books forever. It's like always sells well. Like it sells approximately 3,000. We'll just say 3,000 copies, about 2 to 3, high 2,000, 3,000 copies a week, every single week. Period. It just sells. It always is selling because that's what you need and that's what people are going to buy. So that totally makes sense. But even if it's selling 2,000 copies a week, what's that like about 100? It sells about maybe 150,000 copies a year. That's nothing for $1 billion company. I mean, I'm like, that's not enough.
But like I said, like so many of these expansion books are just not must buys. Like if you're a new player to D&D, there's very few of them where you're like, I must have this. This adds so many more options and so much content to the game. Like this would be so cool to have. Right? Like there's so few things that they sell that do that. Like compare it to third edition. But the third edition didn't even last 10 years and it had way more content with way more substance to it. More classes, more subclasses, just
totally agree.
So much more. Now that said, there is a balance to be struck because I think third edition maybe was a little bit too much at times, but there's definitely a balance. I think they just haven't produced enough content like of substance at all. So I'm not surprised that the books aren't selling very well.
I mean,
it
to that end,
be a bad cycle.
Yeah, just to dogpile on what you were saying there, Discourse. Like, I can still count the number of houses of friends who are dungeon masters that I go visit, and they will have an entire wall of bookshelves of third edition content, not second edition. And like these are grognards, like they've been playing forever. And it's all third edition. Like 80% of their collection will be third edition. And if you go and play a game with them, they will be able to reference like, go get this book off of this shelf and turn to this page number. And they're just the content for third edition was just that good. Like, yeah, it was crunchy, and I probably wouldn't go personally play it again. But at the time, it was solid stuff.
It was what the core audience
There
wanted.
was a lot.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, keep in mind, like, it was just a different world back then. Like, the people who were making D&D were all geeks. They were all gamers. Everyone who worked there was a gamer. Everyone who played was a gamer. So it was gamers making gamer material, right? Think about it. And you basically have, because everyone's like so surprised about Baldur's Gate 3, like, that like it just won Game of the Year, which like people can't believe. It's like, think about it. It's like an isometric TTRPG, CRPG, one game. How? I mean, this is like such a niche part of the world, and yet this thing is a monster. It's one of the best reviewed games in history. And it's like, yeah, because the CEO wears plate mail. Okay, have you seen the people who work at this company? They are geeks hardcore. So when they made this, they made a game that they love, that they wanted to play. And it's no surprise that this is a fantastic game because they did it because they wanted to make a game that was great and that they loved, and they weren't looking at marketing, they weren't looking at demographics, they weren't looking at any of that stuff. In fact, they even said that they expected at most 100,000 people were going to be playing concurrently when it first came out, and it went up to 850,000, which is a lot. And we were talking before we started, we were talking about World of Warcraft and Blizzard. They were the same thing. Like, early Blizzard was all geeks playing, they were hardcore gamers making games that they loved. And now, for better, for worse, they're very
Discourse,
successful.
are you muted? It looks
that?
like you're muted. I think Discourse is talking
Discourse
and
is
she's muted. Yeah, we're not getting audio from you.
You're
I
muted.
think from
What
her
did you
side,
do?
she's muted.
Did you unplug yourself?
Well, you can talk and see if it works. Well, anyhow, what I'm
we
saying
lost her.
Is that... Oh, did we lose her completely?
She's frozen.
She's frozen.
Did we lose the internets in
no.
Ireland in space?
Oh no! Well, good thing we had a backup on the show.
I guess. I'm glad to be your backup here.
Well, anyhow, I mean, it's just. Oh, and we'd really lost her. Oh no!
Yeah,
Oh no, she's just gone. Maybe she was getting dropped.
She's gone, McGrady. All right, hold on.
I'm in two windows now.
No, you're not. Now you're Discourse Minis there. See, I'm always prepared. I always have a backup plan. Although you're the wrong person.
That's fine.
Whoops.
She'll come back, I'm sure.
So yeah, she'll come back. So, oh wait.
Here, I'll slide over so that I'm in my proper box.
No. All right, I totally lost our train of thought there. Well, what do you think, Discourse? I mean, Baron de Groff. What do you think of this whole thing?
I mean, I think just reflecting on like how the business venture has gone, or like how the tide of events has been going, to say that okay, we're going, we have, for one reason or another, we have ended our relationship with Penguin, right? Okay, fine. But why would you not pick up somebody else? Like, if you already were using Penguin, it seems to me that there's probably a reason that they provide an advantage for the company at WoTC. So, I mean, maybe you're just taking it back in-house because you believe you can, but that seems like a very strange thing to change. That's a status quo thing. Like, that it seems odd that you wouldn't try to pick up another one. And the fact that they're doing it internally leads me to believe that nobody else would give them the time of day, or they couldn't get a reasonable contract with another distributor. Like, I'm curious, did they call Random House? Did they call somebody else and say, hey, can you distribute? And all of them told them to get wrecked because they watched what happened with Penguin. So, are it just because of their own sales figures, are they burned from getting another distributor and they're forced to do it internally? Like, that's my curiosity. And the only reason that they're able to do it internally is because they're willing to sink the money in for brand awareness reasons. Like, we just have to have the books in the stores for the brand awareness. Like, it's just marketing at this point. We're not actually intending to make money.
Yeah, but that can't be, because they are bleeding money. I mean,
oh no, I'm not saying they're not bleeding money. I'm just saying, like, what one department would do is not necessarily what the accounting department tells them to do.
Right.
If that makes sense.
Guess what? She's back. Oh, look at that. Except you guys are in the
Discourse
wrong
is
spots.
back in space.
Nice try, Baron. Nice try.
What did
Nice
you do?
try to be Discourse.
Oh, I know. What happened? We saw you talking, and then you froze up, and then your satellite connection got.
There's a black van outside my house that tries to shut me down constantly, and I'm always fighting those guys. So, but don't worry, I got rid of them.
So you were saying something. We want to hear your words of wisdom.
Well, I was going to say something perhaps a little bit spicy, which is that Baldur's Gate 3, in fairness, is the type of product that you can't really get from a public company like Hasbro WoTC, right? Like, it's a type of. It took like 6 years for them to make this game. It was a massive massive gamble. And it is the sort of thing that only somebody who is really passionate about the genre, about the game, would actually make, because they want to see it created, right? It's a creative endeavor. They want to see this product exist, and that's why. But so much content these days, and it's affecting all media, I think, is just produced because it's going to be profitable. That's it. That's the goal. That's the purpose. That's why it's made, and it's being directed by people who have no real stake in it beyond just the financial. They don't actually put their heart and souls. Now, that's not to say there's not creative people who are making products out there. You know, like the D&D team, I think, are actually extremely creative. But for the company Hasbro, in terms of like Chris Cox and Cynthia Williams, I'm not sure how much they actually care about the quality of product that they're putting out, so much as it just makes them money, right? And it's kind of funny seeing them kind of enjoy the success of Baldur's Gate 3 when really they had nothing to do with it, like whatsoever.
Oh,
that was Cynthia Williams even employed by WoTC when they got the license?
No, it was like, 6 years.
She literally has no skin in the game whatsoever.
Nope. It makes me so. I am a gargantuan fan of Larian Studios, and they literally made Divine Divinity so that they can get Dungeons and Dragons. Like they literally made those two games so that they can show that they can make a game, and they had an engine ready to go so that they can get Baldur's Gate. And there's a lot of stories on this, and those games are fantastic. Like you play Divine Divinity Original Sin 1 and 2. I love those games, and I saw that and how insane they were in those games, and I kept saying, I'm like, these guys are nuts. Like they are truly insane. What they put into those games. I was expecting Baldur's Gate 3 to do really well and be amazing. Not even this was way beyond what I expected, but I am not that surprised considering their other games are this good too. But you are right. It's a weird thing. It's like if you get too big, then you can't have the personal touch, and then you lose what you became.
I think going public has killed every single company that I've enjoyed the content of. Going public has killed them all, has ruined them all for me, because the pressures are different. The things that they have to do are different. Like, for example, like with the Dungeons and Dragons right now, it makes sense that they're going to push D&D into a digital space and away from, I mean, like we've been talking about, the sales of their books aren't as high as maybe you'd even expect. But I bet that their digital products will sell well, because the margins on them are going to be so astronomically high compared to the physical products that they don't need to sell too much. I mean, we live in a world where recently there was news that the horse item sold in the World of Warcraft item store, the digital horse you could purchase as an optional purchase, that made more money than StarCraft 2 made for Blizzard. Like they made more money with so much less work and effort than StarCraft 2. And in a world where your goal is not to create good products, your goal is to create products that are profitable and sell and maximize the income, well, of course you're going to keep making horse armor. Of course that's all you're going to make, because why would you make StarCraft 2? It's so much work and effort and energy. It takes forever, and it's a risk. It's a gamble. You know horse armor will sell, and it will sell so much money. Of course it will. So if you become a public company, you have to do that. There's no choice anymore. You don't get to choose. You have to do that. You have to inflate your stock. And that it kills them. It kills companies, because they don't become about good products anymore. They only care about making money.
Yeah, I mean,
and not just making money, but like the notion of like pleasing stakeholders so that the line is consistently going up. Like that's the thing. Like it's not acceptable while other stock options are making money. Like it's not acceptable to just, well, guys, we're just going to sit here at $32 a share. And it's not maximizing. You're just going to have to wait for 6 years until we finally knock this one out of the park. And then finally we'll have the media coverage to justify charging $280 for our next round of public releases. So
Well, it's kind of funny, like, because we were talking about Blizzard Entertainment. And I think they get brought up a lot for a really good reason, because throughout the 2000s, all they focused on, there was this business model that they pioneered, which was the Blizzard guarantee, where you would buy a game that was produced by Blizzard because it would always be good. They would have spent, years and years polishing it, and it made them loads of money. They were not unprofitable. They made lots and lots and lots of cash, huge amounts of money. But then they go public. They get bought out by Activision.
Yeah.
And then they start making more money from World of Warcraft. So suddenly, what is acceptable amounts of cash and profit suddenly jumps up, and they have to keep meeting that goal, because as part of a public company, you have these outside stakeholders. You have to please them. You can't the line can't be seen to go stagnant, never mind go down. So you have to make more money than last year. And it creates these pressures that just, it compounds upon itself. And that's why Blizzard is the company that it is today, because it's not about quality anymore, because it didn't make them enough money compared to just selling more, digital horses.
Yeah. Well, They were making billions of dollars per line, though. I mean, they made a lot of money.
Like, don't get me wrong. I think that making good products just consistently, like spending the time to make good products, is generally actually a really good business model. Mm-hmm. I think it tends to make a lot of cash.
Absolutely.
But long term, because it's indeterminate things. It's like brand recognition, and like people will purchase it next time because they think it's a good. It's kind of like YouTube, right? You can make like a crazy title and a crazy thumbnail and get loads of clicks, but if the video isn't good enough, if people go, okay, well, this is actually trash. This isn't about, like, the title doesn't represent anything about what's in the video, well, they won't click next time. You could do a crazy title and a crazy thumbnail next time and have the best packaged thing ever. But if the actual substance is bad, people will catch on after a while and they won't buy it anymore. This happens, people fall out of love with brands. It's hard to do, though. Like, it's hard to fall out of love with a brand, but it can happen. And
or like, for example, another one that I've kind of harped on in other interviews and live streams is like the Marvel comic universe right now is just completely imploding because they're releasing a video or a movie that is extremely expensive to produce, and they're releasing one every quarter, and they're just not nearly as funny as they were 10 years ago. Like, we can only handle so much. So you have to have a good substrate to sell the shiny horse armor. Otherwise, there's nowhere to sell the shiny horse armor, and that's what gets missed in this kind of mindset when you have pressure.
Yeah. Like, I'm very curious as to whether or not World of Warcraft actually makes more money these days with all the monetization that's occurred compared to like 10 years ago, even though 10 years ago it was regarded as a vastly better game. More people played it, and yet maybe it's just not monetized as effectively and aggressively, right?
It probably is close from what I know, because they were just making money off. Oh, keep in mind, when at their height, they had, I think, 12 million subscribers, and they were making like $15 a month or so per subscriber. I forgot what it was back then. It's gotten way lower. I think it's up to like 1 or 2 million now, which is still a lot. Don't get me wrong, but they make a ton of money on. They're all, this term, Discourse, they're all whales. Like, if you play World of Warcraft now, you're pretty hardcore. Like, it's not a lot of casuals in that game. As someone who was into World of Warcraft for 10 plus years myself, and I was one of those people who bought the horse armor. I would be buying those special mounts because, you know what? It works. You're in that community, and my friends are there. What's $10-20 if I'm spending 40 hours a week in this community, and I'm going to be spending a lot of time on my mount, which you do, I want it to look good, which is really no different than buying a nice car or wearing nice clothes. It's everything that we do in the physical world, just extrapolated to the digital world. It's the same behaviors. And it seems like weird and strange because it's like, ooh, why are you doing that? It's digital. I'm like, well, why did you spend $500 on that, shirt? I mean, you can buy a $10 shirt. You don't need to spend all that money. And like, well, it makes me feel good. Well, there you go.
It's still the same. Ultimately, it is the same kind of it's the same compulsion that has, for example, Barron's, all his whole Grognard friends with the wall of third edition books, right? Like people would like, and maybe they're even like, how many of like things from those books have they actually played with? You know, like at a certain stage, you just get them because you love the content. Like you just want more content to own. Like there are definitely things that I have bought like for miniature wargaming or RPGs, and I've just bought the expansions. I'm not going to play this game with anybody. Like no one wants to play it, but I buy it because I want it. You know, I just want it. And, all right.
I think some percentage of users actually use a lot of the content. Like I had all those 3.5 books, and my group and I used probably nearly every book, at least a little bit that we had. But then again, you know, now I am a game designer and I was one of the co-designers of PF2. So I'm probably like in a very minority group of people who are very, very deep into game design and tabletop RPGs that is not representative of the typical person, either the typical consumer, whether they would buy it or not in the first place, and whether they would use it after they bought it.
Oh yeah, like I'm gonna keep playing a bard. You know, like it doesn't matter how many subclasses. I bought books of other subclasses. I'm gonna keep playing a bard every time. Yeah, I'm not playing anything else. I don't know why I pretend that I will.
There you go, Wizards. Discourse needs a bard only Tasha's expansion. Nothing but bard options.
But it's that compulsion then that WoTC, I think that Hasbro are kind of hoping will kick in when things move on to the digital space and they start to sell these items and these skins inside, because they want to sell their horse armor, right? The difference, though, I think, between the kind of product that you buy, like the book, you know, with content in it, versus, say, a sword skin or like a fancy cloak on your character in game, is that with the book, you own it, like you have it, like you can put it on your shelf and you can flick it open and read it. Like with World of Warcraft, you could lose access to your account. They could turn it off. And all that money, those thousands of dollars on like all your little penguin, like little pets and your little squire and your horse and your like fancy armor, like it's gone, you know, like they don't know you anything. That's it. It's a license.
Except for
that always makes me wary.
Yeah, but one small problem is we are old men yelling at clouds because
have you seen my channel? Have you seen my channel? I'm a relatively young person yelling at a cloud.
Well, you're older than you think because, you know, like the next generation, which are like my kids, they're quickly becoming adults, and they grew up with iPads and iPhones from birth. Like they don't know a world without it, which is really just starting now. And to them, having digital content and digital, you know, products is not that weird. You know, it just isn't. I mean, they're just used to it.
Yeah.
And Baron and I were talking about is that if you put like a controller in front of a kid, they are looking for the touch, or if there's even a touch screen, they're trying to touch it. Like everything's touch screen because that's how they interact with the world. So if things don't have touch screens, they don't even know what to do. I mean, heck, my freaking car has a touch screen. Everything has a touch screen now. It's all touch screens.
and just to dogpile onto that, do we actually own everything now? Like what was it? Ring Doorbell had a server outage. Or the Ring home security company had a server outage with AWS for a while, and people who just paid $500 for a security system in their home, nope, not for the next 3 days. You don't, you know. So and
that's wild.
There's no option with the hardware to wire it to your own home server to log your own video. Like you don't actually, yes, you may own the hardware, but it can be terminated and bricked by any number of things at the will of the company that's providing the service. So, you know, that's becoming more and more and more frequent every day. Well, I would not be shocked if like somebody disables e-pigment in my clothing to make me look naked if I don't pay my clothing rental fees in the cyberpunk future of 2077.
My printer wanted me to subscribe to it. My printer. I'm like, what the heck?
Yeah, the printers, that's because
the ink wasn't enough.
Yeah,
right.
Like,
yeah, they wanted you to subscribe to the print. Well, I don't know if you heard this. So it turns out that 10% of all ice cream machines in McDonald's are always broken. Okay, and they couldn't figure out, like, so you can look this up. There's a website on this. Is that some engineers were like, 10% is way too high. Like, there's something going on. And sure enough, they got their hands on a machine, you know, because you can't just get one. And they reverse engineered, and it turns out that they said that these machines purposely fail and require maintenance.
The slightest thing.
No, not even that.
Throw an error message.
Not even that. Okay. But it's even worse. They just stop because they want them to stop. And that all the messages are codes, and you can't get the codes without getting this book. And of course, the book is proprietary, and you can't get it, and it's only within the company and the repair people. So they go through all these steps to make sure that not only are they the only ones who know what's going on, the people who make the ice cream machine, they're the only ones that know what's going on, the only ones who know how to repair it, and the only ones who have any idea, you know, what can be done about these machines. And it was kind of a scandal, and I think they're replacing or getting rid of the machines because it's just not worth it.
Yeah, the best part of that story that I think you left out, Steven, is that the company that makes that machine also makes the Wendy's Frosty machine, and the Wendy's Frosty machine has no problem whatsoever. You can almost always consistently go get a Frosty.
Right.
But 10% of the time you show up at a McDonald's, you can't get that McFlurry.
Yeah, 10%. And it's consistent.
Wild.
And they're like, that can't be. And that's exactly what they did. And someone said the John Deere repair lawsuit. That was another one, is that the John Deere, was it like, you know, with their huge farm equipment that costs hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars, if you wanted to do an upgrade, a software upgrade, you had to pay John Deere a ton of money, and they had to do it. And there's all these sites on like how to hack your John Deere, you know, equipment to do a patch.
Yeah, just pirate it. Just pirate it.
Literally pirate it. I'm like, wow, this is our future.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
So if you want your refrigerator to continue cooling, you're gonna literally have to hack your refrigerator in the
pay the subscription fee. You know.
Seriously.
What is it? If there's a Metal Gear Solid. One of the I haven't played any of them, but there's one particular Metal Gear Solid game where I know like there's a narrative twist near the climax of the story where.
Spoilers.
Yeah, spoilers, where the main antagonist of the game has basically dominated all technology and has basically done everything that we're talking about. Everything is like totally built into his, you know, ultra
live
system
service.
of
his live service system. Yeah,
exactly. And so he like dominates all the security guards' rifles, so that they can't shoot him when he starts going madman, like full on madman wizard. Except for one security guard decided, you know what? I'm going to rootkit my own gun because I want control of it. And because that guy did it, he is able to shoot his gun and without being locked out of his own trigger.
I will say there that works well in Shadowrun, where everything is like connected up to their kind of internet. And so if you're playing as a hacker, that's how you interact with a fight, you know, with the other players. You're like hacking into like the guns of the security or into their eye implants and stuff and turning them blind. Like it's pretty cool. But yeah, live service model, subscription fees are evil. On another note, though, check out my Patreon at patreon.com.
Hey, man. I was going to talk about that in a second. Actually, I do want to talk about that because let's get to a super chat. Knights of Last Call, Derek. Hey, Derek, you want to join us? We'll get 5 on. Never had 5 on.
Do you even have one for 5?
No, I don't.
Do we even have an ability? We'd have to do like columns
one day.
half of our face.
One day. He asks and says, what does that say about us as customers that horse download content DLC makes more money than a great game? You see, I disagree. Is that the people who play World of Warcraft are now part of a community and they want to support the world and the community. And this is just them buying a t-shirt or jeans or a souvenir, if you will. I mean,
totally agree.
This is no different than I am a huge sports fan. I have a lot of sports. My office is covered with bobbleheads and sports memorabilia. I mean, covered. And I get joy out of seeing all of them. And I don't regret. I don't even know what I paid for them. I'm sure they cost money at the time. I'm sure they weren't even, that cheap. I'm sure many of these were expensive. I don't care. I don't know, because I have years of enjoyment out of these things. If I'm playing World of Warcraft and I'm going to pay $15 for armor, for horse armor, or a specific steed, like a nightmare steed, and I'm going to be playing this game with my friends and I get to show it off, and every time I look at it, I feel happy. Who cares?
Yeah. I mean, just to add to that, every chance I get, and this is one of those chances, I try to harass Kelsey over at the Arcane Library because I want a Stingbat plushie, and she has not provided them. And I just want that little tchotchke on my desk.
And I know how to make. I can help her. Actually, she's coming on the show in a few weeks. I can help her make plushies because I know how to make plushies. And
so everybody go link
the Roll for Combat
this. Go drop this video over in the Arcane Library's Discord. Tag this timestamp and tell her we need Shadow Dark.
It's not even that
Stingbat
hard.
plushies. I know.
It's not that hard. I can have it done for her, no problem. It's so I'm
going to start harassing you too, because you can make it happen. I'll front the upfront cast just so I can have one.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, now there's real talk. There's business.
There's real. Let's not go crazy here.
Well, there's the companies that will make plushies of anything you want. Because my kids have that. Like, you send them. There's actually a lot of these companies. You send them a picture, and then they'll make a plushie of what you want. So if you just want a one-off, you can have that made, no problem.
There we go.
There you go. So
witness in history, chat. Witness in history.
I don't know about that.
I just want to jump onto that comment though, because I do actually. So I'm not sure if it certainly reflects on the community so much as it reflects on the companies that produce these live service models, because it's not. These storefronts are explicitly designed to compel consumers to purchase them. They aren't neutral spaces. They are spaces that are owned by that corporation. And there is a lot of tricks that they deploy to get people to buy in. They use currencies that you can pick up that will have odd kind of numbers. They'll give you some free currency. Yeah, they'll give you some free currency, and then you'll be like, oh, well, I could buy something, but nothing is quite at the level of the free amount. So you're like, well, I'll put in $5 and then I'll have enough to buy like this new horse armor, right? They'll do things like give you a free item in the store, meaning that you'll want to click into the store every single day. So you're constantly being exposed to this advertising. And advertising does work. Like, advertising works. There's a reason why companies spend so much money on it. There's a lot of manipulative tactics that these companies make to try and sell their horse armor. I don't think that it's just necessarily a case that you're like, I want to support them, like a lot of people, like I try not to buy digital items in games because it's not like of super interest to me, but sometimes I get tempted, and it's because they can be extremely manipulative, and the stuff that they do does work. Like, they are explicitly trying to do this, and I'm concerned that a similar storefront, I mean, we're already seeing it with D&D Beyond, and I'm concerned that if that becomes the space for Dungeons and Dragons, that kind of manipulative content is going to be constantly thrust in front of players, in front of vulnerable players, because not everyone is equal. There are certain people who are more vulnerable to this type of advertising than others.
All right, well,
that's going to constantly be thrust in front of people, and it's going to result in a lot of sales, yes, but I'm not sure if they're ethical sales.
I completely agree. There's a difference between like using these backhanded techniques of weird currencies and digital diamonds, and we all know them. Like, you see them all the time in those free to play games. Buy to win and all that crap. But then, okay, what about digital subscriptions? And I don't mean, and it could be even Netflix, of something that doesn't have upsell. That's literally just a digital subscription for something you enjoy that you can cancel at any time, and that you get, whether it is, let's get real simple, a magazine subscription. Remember those? It's like where you just get a magazine every week or every month, or a subscription for like I have my adventure line subscription from Paizo, where every month I get one of these, and I enjoy it. I get every month I get an adventure from them, and that's just a subscription service.
Yeah, that's like fine. Magazine subscriptions are fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and even for that matter, like Adobe gets a lot of flack when they stopped doing with Creative Cloud version 3. Or excuse me, Creative Suite version 3 and went to the Creative Cloud subscription model. They got a lot of flack for that, but I'm like, It gives a more consistent stream of income they can show to stakeholders. Like that's way better than not having that to the user.
As someone who was paying, oh my god, like to get the same content and like to get Photoshop, Illustrator, Premiere Pro, InDesign, like all that, you're talking like $5,000 a year, as opposed to
is it?
It used to be, as opposed to $30 a month, and you get
with
everything.
Creative Cloud. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah, it was like $5,000 for the suite. So, and I had to buy
that. Would be forever. Would that be you'd have it forever?
No, that's for 1 year.
Oh well, then that's still a subscription service. That sucks.
Well, it wasn't. Well, you owned it, and you didn't have to upgrade.
Yeah, you owned it.
You
didn't have to upgrade.
You didn't have to. Now, keep in mind, back when I had a company in Manhattan, and I had to buy a lot of Photoshop. I mean, you'd be paying $50,000. I mean, they had like deals when you were getting up to
just use
numbers.
GIMP. There's free alternatives.
It didn't exist in the 90s. Like the things I was using. None of that stuff. Well, okay, fine.
It's the 90s. There's so much stuff to invent.
There was not a lot of stuff. But the point is that because they were fighting hackers and they were fighting cracked programs, they had to charge $1,000 to buy the program. Now I did get around it. I tell you,
they didn't have to charge that much.
Well, they didn't.
They could have made it cheaper.
They wanted to.
Well, they did, and they got away with it because companies like myself and other big companies, that was the industry standard, and you had to buy it. Now, again, when you were buying, it was really like, okay, if you bought one copy, it was $1,000, but if you bought 10, it was like $1,500. No, it was even less. It was like it was like $1,500 or $2,000 for 10 copies. Like they gave you pretty much scale. Like it was basically you had to spend at least $1,000, but after that they gave you really cheap and it started to go way down. But because they have the ability to have these subscription services, they can charge $20, $30 a month and give you everything in their suite. And it's constantly being updated and it's constantly working. And I like this way better, sort of.
Well, I think there's there's upsides and downsides to it, right? Like a subscription service in general, I think has upsides and downsides. Usually it's a lower cost at first. So it means that you can kind of afford to get the service, that maybe you wouldn't be able to pay. Like, even if it wasn't like a digital good, if it was like a car, right? You pay it out over installments, that I think that's fine. I just I resent the fact that the options are going away. It's just everything is moving to subscription fees because I don't like subscriptions. I don't like having to remember it. I don't like having the budget for it in my kind of scale. I'd rather just pay money, get something, own it, and then boom, not have to think about it anymore. Not have to do like the emotional and intellectual labor of like remembering all these subscription fees and worrying about them in my budget. Personally speaking. So, but I mean, like if it was like Adobe, for example, I would just find a way to get access to it if I really needed it.
Well, there are free or cheaper alternatives to all these programs.
I don't pay. I use GIMP for all my Photoshopping and thumbnails, and I use DaVinci Resolve for my editing. All free.
Right. I have heard of
Kden Live, which is open source, and I use Photopea, which is not open source, except actually, yes, it is because it's in JavaScript in your browser, and it is a 1-to-1 clone of Photoshop.
I've heard about that. I heard that it's like
it's awesome.
I've heard about that. It's crazy.
Yeah,
that you can use Photoshop in your browser. That's like insane.
Photopea.com. P is in the vegetable. P.
P as
Photopea.
P.
Photopea.com.
What a weird name.
I know, right?
Yeah.
They got sued by Adobe, and because they were going on a copyright issue, like there's the interface of Photoshop, there's nothing trademarkable about it, the interface itself, so they couldn't get them on that. Nice. So then they went after it from copyright, and they couldn't do that because the code for Adobe Photoshop is written in C++, but Photopea is written in JavaScript, so it's entirely different code. It just creates the same results on your screen. So the total lawsuit just was an absolute bust. It's hilarious to me.
So,
but yeah, like I am concerned for the future of Dungeons and Dragons. Like I get that the kind of newer generation of role players are are used to dealing with these types of products and digital goods, and kind of buying cosmetics in their games and these upsells and free to play. It's just that I do think that it's a better game when it's played physically with your imagination and not relying on digital items to like enhance that experience. I get some people prefer that. That's fine. But I think that generally speaking, it's better physically. And I am worried. I don't think that WoTC Hasbro can be trusted, to be frank, to not start creating like loot boxes and horse armor and selling like licensed goods. Like you get to be Frodo and trying to maximize the revenue that they can, especially if it starts to, we were at the golden age of Dungeons and Dragons there for a moment. It was huge attention on it. If that starts to go away a little bit, I think they're gonna try and monetize it more aggressively.
Oh, absolutely. My question that I keep asking that nobody really gives me a satisfactory answer for, and part of it is just we'll have to see. But the writing is on the wall even for Hasbro. Like toys are pretty much dead. Kids are playing video games from a very early age. If now Dungeons and Dragons as a brand and as a concept is moving away from the tabletop space, like sure, they will nominally support it, but if it's not in big box stores, they're not pushing marketing to physical products because that's not where the money is, and they're only doing it to appease a very small sliver of the audience that for some reason still desperately wants to play 5th edition at the table. Yeah, exactly. That used to be me like 3 or 4 years ago. What company, like, is Paizo ready to step into that tabletop hole? Like, is Goodman Games ready? Like, what game company has the ability to make
Steve Jackson GURPS? It's coming.
Oh my god!
I don't know. I don't know if they're ready for that.
Like there's a scaling crisis that has to happen for whatever company decides to move into that space. And is Chaosium able to make that jump? I know that in Japan, like the de facto RPG is Call of Cthulhu, sure. But even that is an extremely niche game, even though they call them table talk games in Japan, which honestly I think might be a better word than tabletop games.
Yeah,
it is tabletop games.
Yeah.
But it's like that's my question. In order to prevent the hobby itself from imploding, there has to be like one central pillar that everybody kind of gravitates to, because otherwise if you don't have that, the only thing that sticks around are the hardcores, and we have to have something that pulls casuals into the culture.
So I think that, first of all, in terms of the company, I don't think there is anybody who steps into that, because the size difference between WoTC and everybody else is so unfathomably large. Yeah. I can't see anyone. I think, like Chaosium, Paizo, Critical Role, maybe Darrington Press kind of are like the ones in my head that could kind of maybe fulfill a similar sort of role, but I don't think any of them would ever be as big as Hasbro WoTC.
I mean, I've been thinking about this a lot. That actually was the secondary topic, which is what happens if D&D just fails? And, what happens if it just none of this works? And D&D, it doesn't really go away, but it just doesn't do what it needs to do. And it doesn't grow, or it becomes something it's not, which is a video game. And then what happens to the TTRPG? Either others take up the slack, which would be like the Pathfinders and the Call of Cthulhu's and a million other games out there in the world, or does it become something else and it becomes Dungeons and Dragons a video game, and maybe that is just something completely different? It's like there's almost two, like right now we still think of D&D as a TTRPG, but I wonder in 5 years, are we going to be thinking of D&D as its own thing, like Oh, it's not a TTRPG. It's a pseudo video game / role playing game / monetized.
It's an IP.
Yeah, it's an RP. I don't even know what it would be. Is it a virtual tabletop program? And the other ones, those are TTRPGs. And I have a feeling they kind of want that. I have a feeling they don't even want to be a TTRPG anymore.
Oh, for sure, 100%.
Like that latest annual report didn't mention the game. It didn't mention the game one. They talk about Dungeons and Dragons as an IP. As like an intellectual property, you know, that they can, where are we going to license this IP D&D, you know, like that's clearly where their focus is going forward. And I think that's kind of what they meant by monetizing D&D players more, right? They want to get the IP out there. And I'll be honest, I don't think that if Dungeons and Dragons were to stop, say they were just to stop making new books for Dungeons and Dragons, I don't think that's necessarily like the worst thing in the world for the RPG community. I think it's kind of bad, but I still think that the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons would live on. I think if you said Dungeons and Dragons, people would still get that idea of it being this kind of tabletop game where everyone rolls dice. I just think that that's so in the popular consciousness of Dungeons and Dragons. I think it's really hard to step away from that.
I 100% agree. And in fact, this will be another topic that I might talk about one day, is there's a thing called a Q rating. And that is the familiarity with a brand, celebrity, company, or entertainment product that's used in the United States. It's a Q score, Q rating. It's the same thing. And what is unbelievable and which must drive WoTC absolutely insane is that the Q rating for D&D has got to be way up there. We're talking like one of the highest, probably in the top 200s, because everyone has heard of Dungeons and Dragons. Like, I don't know anyone who hasn't heard of it. They might not know what it is, but that's not what it measures. It measures brand awareness. And I was watching TV late at night, and Futurama came on, and there's a 4-part Futurama episode where they are chasing after polyhedron die and playing in a digital world of Dungeons and Dragons. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like,
was that movie?
It was the movie.
4 episodes?
Right. It was actually, it's if you watch it on TV, it's a 4-part episode, but it's an actual movie. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, man, it is just so mainstream. Like, they just, like, there's the community episode of Dungeons and Dragons. It's just, they had, Ready Player One, which had Dungeons and Dragons. Like, it's everywhere. Okay. Everyone knows about Dungeons and Dragons. Everyone's heard about it. Some of the most popular media in the entire world was a Critical Role just sold out Wembley Stadium. Insane. To watch people play Dungeons and Dragons. So everyone knows. Yet, the amount of money it makes compared to the Q rating is abysmal. It doesn't make anything compared to what it should.
Well, should it? I mean, RPGs just don't make a lot of money. Like, they just don't. Like, they're not a product that makes a lot of money. Like, Paradox bought World of Darkness, the IP brand, for like $1.5 million, Like, and that was to make video games about it. That's
hilarious.
Like, RPGs just don't make a lot of money. And I don't think that that's like the worst thing ever. I don't think that everything needs to like turn like crazy amounts of like profit. I think if there's enough money in it to sustain jobs, to sustain new products, to get new exciting stuff out there, you're still going to get people making RPGs, because guess what? Like, they're really passionate about it. Like, everybody wants to make a goddamn RPG if you're anywhere near the industry, right? Like, it's an exciting thing to do. It's an awesome hobby. I don't think it needs to make like the amount of money that WoTC Hasbro evidently expect it or need for it to make in order to kind of justify it existing on their top shelf, like Magic the Gathering, right? Like, we don't need like a TCG. We don't need booster packs for Dungeons and Dragons just because it will make more cash.
Yeah, but
you're touching right on the issue with it, is that Magic the Gathering, even though it's a game, it is also a commodity, because you're constantly having to buy new to stay relevant with the latest edition's cards. But it's not Kleenex. You can't just go. You can't justify just going and buying 18 players handbooks, but you can do that. You can go buy half a pallet of Kleenex, Kleenex boxes.
Yeah.
I mean, well, the thing is that before D&D really got noticed by Hasbro, I think we were still seeing a renaissance and the old school mentality of Dungeons and Dragons. Like when D&D 5th edition came out, it's not my favorite edition, but it's still fun in limited doses for my players. It's nice to be a superhero. It's nice to go and just destroy everything for a little while. It's a fun game. But then suddenly, in a weird way, its own success has almost doomed it to failure, because now suddenly they're doing so well, or they were doing so well, that they started to pay attention to them. WoTC wasn't even mentioned on any of their corporate earnings reports until just a few years ago. I mean, Hasbro had WoTC for all those years, and they weren't even mentioned. That's how big they were. That's how important they were. They weren't even mentioned. Now it's like the center of their earnings report. And that has really kind of destroyed the game and destroyed the brand, because now they are sacrificing the game, and I would say the soul of D&D, to make money. And that is going to be very interesting to see what happens in the next few years. And until the OGL scandal, which, yes, it sucked, but in a lot of ways I say thank God it happened, because I know a lot of people who work in the industry that I can't name names who knew what WoTC was like, and knew that they were basically trying to milk it for money. And everyone before people would be like, WoTC's the greatest company. They love us. They love us as players. They love the community. Everything's roses. They're great. And boy, did that change overnight. And they went from, wait a second, they're not our friends. They're not just doing this for the love of the game. They just want money. And and all of a sudden, all these it's amazing, because I would be like, you're wrong. I mean, I wouldn't be going out saying people are wrong.
The company isn't one person. I think that's the problem people have when they try to anthropomorphize a company as one person. Say, this company is my friend, or this company just wants money and is not my friend. The company is never your friend, and a company usually is never just literally one entity that just wants money. Like the creators who design these Dungeons and Dragons books, who you might have met at a convention, and I personally know some of them. They are great. They are great creators. They're great at writing. They care about the game and they want it to be good, and they love the community, right? But that doesn't mean that Wizards of the Coast, the giant corporate entity, does, just because the design team for the game does, or the editing team, or any of those other people, because at the end of the day, none of those people have the real power to make decisions. It's the executives. And even those executives aren't really giant WoTC Hydra with multiple heads. They're separate people that have different opinions. And maybe there's some people out there who do want to be friends, and maybe there are others who want to be super ruthless. And the point is, you can never predict what a company is going to do just based on knowing the people and trusting the people, unless it's like a tiny company where it's not publicly traded and like one person has the private owner has like all the power. Then you can generally trust that, like Steven is Roll for Combat. Whatever the heck Roll for Combat is going to do, that's going to be based on Steven. So if you can trust Steven, you can trust Roll for Combat, right? But that's not the same thing for WoTC. And I think too often people conflate WoTC and its employees as one thing, and say things like, well, I trusted them, and now I don't now. But everything's the same and it's different because the companies are not people. So that's my hot take for today.
You're so right. Like, and it's so difficult to maintain that, like, in your mind, because it's so easy to anthropomorphize it. Because, I mean, that's what the brand is, right? Like, the brand is designed to create this fiction that you associate certain emotions and thoughts and behaviors with, and you start to think of as if like the corporation is like this living, breathing person. Whenever you read like its advertising products or its synopsis or its press releases, you're like, okay, here is WoTC telling me a thing, but it's just some person who has written something, in this big collection, this huge hive of all these different individuals who are all interacting, and like, 100%. But it's really hard to keep in mind. It's really tough because I think our language doesn't do a great job of actually discussing these types of entities.
Well, I think it's as human beings, the same way that you look at a car and you see a face. You know,
Christine.
it's like we deal with humans all day, all night, our entire lives, and we use that on companies, on products, on houses, on on our animals. Like we use emotions to define how we feel about them or what we think of them, and that happens all the time. And so I don't think it's something you could escape from if you're a human. So
I try. So I personally, I mean, obviously, companies will have certain house styles and things. Like I cover a lot of Games Workshop, and Games Workshop are one of these entities, and like they have a lot of designers, but they keep turning out the same products with the same problems because there's like this house style, and they all kind of keep to that. WoTC is like so big and so massive and so disparate, though, that it's really hard. I always try to. So in my videos, I always try to identify like Chris Cox, right, and Cynthia Williams. Like these are decision makers. These are stakeholders with a lot of actual decision making power at the company, and they really are setting the course of direction. Like there's only so much the designers can do at the end of the day. Like they're there to make the actual content.
Yeah, I've had confidential conversations with people who I will not name, who may or may not have worked at Wizards of the Coast, and cannot legally tell me about their experience, and I can tell you that they have
all the best stories. All the best stories.
I can tell you that they have told me in confidence that the people that work there are wonderful, and that they are trapped in an iron cage.
Yeah.
I mean, do you remember, Baron? Remember? I think Bob told us this. I don't know. That was
World Builder.
Yeah, Bob World Builder. If it's public or private, that when he went to the summit, that the suits were there. And they were like, "Oh, do you want to play D&D? We'll show you how to play." And they're like, "Nah, we're okay." Like this is literally the people who run D&D at Hasbro, and they don't want to play or learn how to play. And
they have no interest.
Yeah, no interest.
It's superfluous. It's superfluous.
Yeah.
It's like, well, don't you represent the brand? Like, I mean, I remember when I was a kid, and you would have like these, not summer jobs, but like a summer jobs. And, you would sort of get indoctrinated into the brand or the corporate identity to learn about it so you can talk about it and you can represent it. And you weren't just like a cog in the wheel. And then you were like all part of the family. And that was a big thing in the 80s and the 90s. And it was a little goofy back then. And people used to make fun of it. And there's movies like Gung Ho that are totally about this like working culture thing. Like, oh yeah, it's like, yeah, we're all part of the culture of work. And it was a big thing in the 80s. But now, I don't know which is worse. Like, okay, you're all part of the family of a company, which really doesn't exist, as we saw after COVID. That totally doesn't exist. Or is it worse to not know anything about the company and the products you're shilling? And I'm like, I don't know which is worse. It's like
would you rather be not Uber but some other kind of delivery driving service where your entire job is going from one business with a widget that's in a black box and delivering it to another company that receives the widget in the black box, and you have no idea what it is, and you have no cultural experience with the thing because you have no coworkers, you're completely isolated in your car, and you're just delivering this thing that may or may not be parts of like an anthrax nuclear bomb, or it could be meat to make cheeseburgers. Like you have no idea what you're actually partaking in at a systemic level.
I'll be honest, that just sounds like making YouTube videos.
It really does, doesn't it?
Yeah, but
this is our life.
There's something to be said that, and Mark, you can probably even talk to this more, is that the crossroads of creative people and people with good business sense does not often mix. And I'm not trying to put anyone down, but it is very rare to see those two mix. I'll give you an example of one that does mix, and probably one of the best in the world. Taylor Swift. You can say a lot of things about her, but oh my God, she is a genius in business, and she's a genius creatively, and she can do both very well.
Very well.
Steve Jobs was another one. And he was both technical and creative and business genius. There are cases where these people mix, and you hear about them. But
what
way
about
more
people who mess up on both sides, like Elon Musk? Can't do either.
I won't get into that. It's a whole other can of worms I can open up. But the other thing is that
for a social media platform.
Yeah, but the point is that I've seen this a lot where you have creative people who do something, get creative, get very successful, and now have to start running it as a business, and they're not equipped to handle it. And then the business part fails. Gary Gygax, there's a perfect example. The example, if you will. Like, he was not a good businessman in any way, shape, or form.
In fact, just to draw that in, I keep meaning to get the guy on my channel, and you know, you may, because you live stream so much more than me, Steven, you may want it. I met at PGX, Pittsburgh Gaming Expo, which is a cross-denominational con. It's like video games, music, like everything nerd culture, but specifically around gaming. I met the original artist of the Mortal Kombat series, and he was telling me a story about right after Dungeons and Dragons or TSR went bankrupt, and Dave Arneson had just gotten denied by Wizards of the Coast to be a lead designer on the 3rd edition of Dungeons and Dragons. And he was at a con signing books and was just totally broke, totally dejected. He's like, the guy looked like he was a bum. Like, we didn't realize who he was until he sat down at we thought he was like camping at somebody famous's booth, and he was just next to us. And like, he was totally heartbroken, totally dejected. And we had to take him out for beers and get his spirits up. But, you know, Dave Arneson is in the same boat, like, great creative ideas, no business sense.
Yeah. And then what happens is you bring in these people that you hope will be business leaders and know what they're doing. And maybe, yes, they don't understand the brand completely, or they don't understand what they're selling. But if they're good, hopefully they will do a good job. And sometimes that works out and sometimes it doesn't. I mean, a good example was Apple back in the early 90s, when who'd they bring in? When Steve Jobs was ousted from the board, and they brought in Scully to run Apple, and they were like weeks away from bankruptcy because he just did not understand the industry at all. Steve Jobs was brought in and made Apple what it is today. You know, like, they were like 6 weeks from bankrupt to the richest company on planet Earth, where they were like $3 trillion or something. And just because you're good at business doesn't mean you're going to be good at the business you're brought in.
I think that the trick of the matter is that creative genius, business genius, and even being an excellent manager, which is like a separate thing, are all not completely independent. Obviously, there could be someone who the reason they don't get it for one of those three things prevents them from getting it on all of them, but they're relatively independent. And in a lot of cases, you would like to have someone managing creatives who understands both creative side and management. And you'd like to have someone running a business for creatives who understands both creative side and business. But the chance of getting that intersection is not much better than the chance of getting someone who's a genius in each one individually and multiplying them together. So if it's a 1%, top 1% in the world creative genius, and you want them to be a top 1% business genius, probably not that much better chance of that than 1 in 10,000.
I think it's rarer than that.
You think it's actually rarer? So you think being a business genius makes you less likely to be a creative genius, or vice versa? I don't think so, because I think that in some cases, not being a creative or business genius may be correlated. So I'd say it's probably about the same. But if you think being one of them actually makes you worse than just a random person picked out of a crowd at the other one, then yeah, it would be less.
I mean, Baron, get your calculator. It's going to be a long night.
No. Well, the only place where you still see it on a regular basis is Hollywood, because a lot of the people who work in Hollywood, my brother's in Hollywood. I used to work in Hollywood, sort of. I worked at MTV and stuff, and the business people were creative. Like they more or less were, they went there because they really loved the company and what they were doing, whether it was movies or working on TV or music. It wasn't like, oh, I'm an accountant. Okay, maybe the accountants were just accountants. But like they liked what they did and they liked to be in that industry. There was a crossover between the two. So I would often see that in entertainment. But nowadays, especially with technology, it's like, I guess it's so strange. You would think, everyone I know in technology is into gaming and geeky stuff. And how do they find like the 2 or 3 people that don't seem to be into gaming? And, they brought them over. You would think that, I don't know, if I was in WoTC and Hasbro, I'd be like, okay, here's the basic requirements. You need to understand what Dungeons and Dragons is. You probably should understand what Transformers is and some of our other main lines. Hopefully you played with them when you were a kid. And no, you don't need to be an expert and know, the difference between Cybertron and I forgot the bad guys' home world. You don't need to know those names, but you should have some familiarity with the brands and be good at your job.
You should at least not be a total embarrassment in a trivia game, like in a basic trivia game.
Right.
Hold on. Are you saying, Stephen, that the problem that WoTC has is that they're filled with noobs? Is that your...
They're filled with what?
The executives are noobs?
Is that it? Yeah. It's like, get good, scrub.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, they
skill
you
issue.
Can't have suits that don't want to be involved with D&D. Like, it just won't work. It's simple as that. Like, you can't have the people who are making the decisions, because how are they going to make good decisions if they don't understand the product?
They're going to copy other companies and just do what they did and translate it over. Easy peasy, Steven. Come on.
What's really interesting about that is if the suits did play the game, they could be involved in brainstorming and say, okay, these are actually good ideas that we can monetize and provide better quality content for our for the end user. Like where is the, like, they can't even do that if Hasbro completely pivots to a video game company right now. Like, do you think Cynthia Williams is all excited to log into Magic the Gathering online?
No. Wonder what decks she owns and plays, in the competitive circuit. Yeah.
Like, can she even tell me what mono blue control means?
Well, many companies these days, like they hire externally, right? Like they'll hire from like the big 5 like finance firms, and they'll hire like people who have nothing to do with, like, Games Workshop are the exact same way. Like their board of directors is filled with people who've never played Warhammer. It's just filled with people who are like from like media companies, computer companies, finance companies, like accountancy firms. Like that's where they all come from, and then they make decisions about toy soldiers.
Yeah, but
they expect it to work like a normal business.
How hard can it be not to find people? They're not forced to hire these people. They can find people that are good at both. It might be more rare, but...
You just said it's rare. You said it's super rare.
It is super rare.
They can't find Steve Jobs sitting on the side of the road.
No, but they only have... But WoTC is WoTC, okay?
There's a lot of nepotism as well that goes on, though. It's like who you know, right? Friends hiring friends.
There is, but you're right. It is rare, but there's only one WoTC. So if they put out a call saying, we're looking for someone who is really good at technology and really good at marketing and business and has to understand Dungeons and Dragons, you will get people, okay? There might not be, if they just put out a call for, you just need to have business acumen, okay, they'll get hundreds of thousands of people. You got to make it, I don't know, like when I put out calls for employees, I ask for a lot of things. And if they don't hit every single one of them, and I have all these sneaky things I do where I'll ask like in the description, I'll ask for examples like in the middle, and in the end, I'll like intersperse it with things. And if I don't get a resume or a response that included all those requests, that shows me that A, you're not reading it, so you're immediately disqualified, and B, you're not that interested. And that gets rid of 98% of the people. But if you get someone who really wants that job, who's really interested, who spends the time and effort and looks at it, you'll get the best people, not only applying, but then you'll have a good stock to try to get and hire from.
Was it Guns N' Roses used to do that of all their gigs? Whenever they went out to different concert halls, they would always ask for like a certain color of like Smarties or something.
Yes.
Like they showed whether or not the gig had like actually read what they wanted.
My job at MTV was I was in charge of the green room and I was in charge of celebrities. And I had to do that. Yes, that was, it was Van Halen. There was a whole bunch. And yes, so they would put in these crazy requests just to see if you were paying attention. And the most difficult people I ever had to work with was the Beastie Boys.
The real dish.
Believe it or not.
Beastie Boys. Really?
Yeah.
Those guys I just thought they wanted to party. That's it. That's all they wanted.
What was their requirement was so
It's 1992 in Manhattan. They're macrobiotic vegetarians. Do you know how hard it was to find macrobiotic vegetarian food in 1992?
What's that mean? What's that mean? Macrobiotic. What I'm confused.
That means you can't even use fertilizer from animals. It has to be compost that is made entirely direct. Like the entire supply chain has to be animal free for your agriculture.
Yes.
Cuts to Stephen out in a field somewhere.
Well, that would be yours. Yours would have like me farming.
That's pretty inconvenient.
This was the year before. This was before the internet, so I had to do the old yellow pages, looking and calling up. I eventually found some place way on the Upper East Side that had food, and that's what I had. It was such a nightmare, and the food looked terrible.
Wow.
I was like, all right, I guess you'll get your food. And the thing is, the studio was across the street from a supermarket, so what I 99% of the time would do is go across the street, get all the crudité and get everything and bring it back and set up the green room. So I had a routine. The other one that was really difficult was Melissa Etheridge. She was,
I don't even know who that is.
What did she need?
She had an entourage of like 20 people, and they all wanted their own thing. So I had to, instead of like just one or two things, I had to get stuff for 20 people, and they all had their own requests. And I was like, there's no Uber Eats back then. I had to run around Manhattan getting all this stuff in just a few hours.
Nice.
The easiest ones were Ray Liotta. He was so nice. He just walked in like off the street. Weird Al Yankovic was really nice. I mean, he was great.
I could definitely see that. He seems super genuine.
Pearl Jam was really nice. They were great.
All good.
I have a story about Pearl Jam.
Hell yeah.
I was a 9-year-old kid,
Mm-hmm.
and my grandmother owned a costume shop, and not talking like Halloween costumes. While that was part of her business, it was like, theatrical costuming in our town, and in the southeast region of the United States, it was like the only place you could get theatrical costuming done, unless you went to Atlanta. There was basically no competition. But they came to my town to do a show, and there was like this one weird wardrobe issue that they had. And they came to my grandmother, or like their lighting guy, in a mad dash to scramble to fix it, came to my grandmother's costume shop, and she was just so, helpful. And she's like, "Oh no, it's Pearl Jam. That's, one of my son's favorite bands. I'm not charging you." They loaded up on a van and came down to my grandmother's shop while the band was setting up, and got a photo with me just because my grandmother said, "Oh no, it's my son's favorite band, and I'm not going to charge you for this." Like that's awesome. That's how dope Pearl Jam is. And I've got, I don't know where the photo is. I've got it somewhere, but I remember like nerdy 9-year-old me like peace signing in front of a coffee shop next door to my grandmother's costume shop with Pearl Jam.
I'm trying to think.
So I have a story in terms of some of those requirements from a former coworker who ran a nonprofit that was pretty wild, which was that the Wu-Tang Clan only accepts payment in cash. And the payment was very large.
That is awesome.
Their charity event had to do. So my former coworker had to go to every bank in the city. They had a duffel bag and they were just withdrawing.
Was there a big dollar sign
amount of cash
on the side of it?
Yeah, they had that stereotypical dollar sign bag that was just eventually became full of cash to pay the Wu-Tang Clan. They were just getting more and more anxious But like, what happened?
Yeah, there's a reason why you hire like
And
Brits
robs
to
us
do
of this
that for you.
giant, this giant bag of cash.
I believe that because yet another thing, Mark. I've done everything. I was a teller at Citibank, believe it or not, and they don't keep that much. They keep a cash around, but not as much as you think. So if you needed more than like 10,000 in cash or so, plus you have to report that to the IRS. So that's a whole other thing. They don't have that. You have to order it. You literally have to order cash if you want more than a certain amount. They'll get it the next day, but it's not something you can just go. You can't just go and ask for like, oh, I need $100,000 in cash. They usually won't have it, or they'll give you a cashier's check or something. So,
And they'll usually, if you ask for that much, they'll usually show up with like somebody from your local state's Bureau of Investigation, or possibly even the FBI, and like they'll give you a wire and make sure, like, do you want to draw on a whiteboard to tell us if you're being put under duress to withdraw this much cash?
yeah. Once you get to
It's the
certain
Wu-Tang
amounts,
Clan. They need
start
it. They
doing
need the
that.
money.
Yeah, they need it.
Well, it's not that unusual. I mean, wait, Ray Charles, because he required that he was always paid in singles because he was blind and everyone was ripping him off. And when he started to get very popular and he was getting paid a lot of money, it was like a lot of singles, and it was turning into a real issue when he eventually got
That's
like
so
someone
funny.
he could trust. But how the heck did we get to this? I don't even remember what we were talking about.
I think it's because Wu-Tang Clan came from you talking about weird requirements of people, which came from contracts, which came from you saying that Hollywood people were passionate about the
correct. That
second
was it.
topic, which came from deciding could you get someone who was an executive with good business sense and who
Right.
was strong on creative topics.
Look at this
which is-
Scribus Adeptum over here, just recanting our entire conversation.
Look, okay. When it comes to recursion, that's something that I was trained in when I was, doing academia with computer science. So I can understand recursion in conversation.
So we had a super chat way back that we missed.
Oh no, what did it say?
Grimlock says, I don't know what it means. I just hope we get over infinite XB clones. Sorry,
BX
clones.
Sorry, BX
Yeah,
clones.
that's a Grognard OSR comment.
Yeah.
He doesn't care what happens to D&D as long as we're still getting retro clones.
Got it. I see.
Yeah,
Yeah, but
I'm glad the OSR person was here to help you answer that.
yeah. Well, Mark knew what that meant.
I'll be
I
honest,
knew it
like-
was from. I knew it was from. They were talking about older clones, but they said that they hope they get over infinite BX clones, which I can't tell if that means that they want more than an infinite number, or if they want to get past the point where everyone is making an infinite number.
Yeah, it sounds to me like
they're
they
pro or
want-
anti.
I think they're anti. I think they're like.
I also
wanna
think
play a
they're
different
anti,
game.
but
I think
they're
I saw
anti,
that you
too.
thought they were pro.
No, now that you've reread it, I agree. And I also agree with the comment, because I call it the OSR, the old school Rococo. It's just completely overwrought at this point.
You think? But
Yeah.
yet there's still demand for it.
Yeah, but it's like, how much more can you staple on? Like, yes, it's all just four.
This one
hit
could
dice.
be. This one could be in black and white and have some cool art. How about that? That'd be a little bit different, wouldn't it? And
Yeah.
how about an analog horror version of it? Huh?
An analog
on.
horror.
Yeah, come on. Like it's like a VHS version. How about that? That'd be a bit different, right?
So,
like that'd be
Wait,
cool.
so is it a rule book that you watch as if it is a movie?
Yeah. How
On a
cool would that be?
And it only comes on VHS.
They already had
Yes.
that. They used
Wait,
to have
what?
yeah. You never saw that? They had a whole joke about that in Community. With the VHS
Yeah.
games. I used to have those.
Oh,
Look at
yes!
Nightmare, the VHS game.
Yes, I remember
Come on.
those. I was
Bring those back. Bring it back. Come on, let's do this.
Those are called video games now.
Well,
Of
those
course.
are called
Wow.
actually. Not only those are called video games. Those are called like what is it? The story games. Like where you're playing.
Yeah.
Those are good games. I mean, they're very popular in Japan. I love those type of games. They're
Yeah.
basically online stories. They're like super advanced choose your own adventure. Those are a lot of fun.
I mean,
Yep,
we're
Captain
here for the
Power.
role playing. We're here for the role playing game hobby, but like, I can
Well,
take
there was
any- I can take
Dragonfire.
this.
Dragonfire was
Anywhere.
the VHS D&D Dragonfire game. How about that?
Mhm.
Yeah,
So-
I never played it. But I've heard of it.
At PaizoCon, Eric Mona used to, at the end of PaizoCon, run a Dragonfire game. Or Dragon Strike. Sorry, Dragon Strike, not Dragon.
Dragon Strike. I'm
Dragon
gonna look this
Strike.
up. Strike.
Dragon Strike. It actually looks pretty cool.
I'm looking it up. I've never heard of this.
Yeah, sorry, I meant
Maybe
Dragon
that
Strike.
could
Everyone's
be-
like, it's not Dragonfire, it's Dragon Strike. I'm like, sorry, my geek nerdom is like slipping. Slightly.
Oh, this is an old SSI game.
Yeah.
Oh, damn.
Wow. What
Visual
year?
Well, maybe
novels,
this-
that's what they're called.
Maybe this could be the
1990.
direction that WoTC go. You know, maybe this could be instead of the virtual tabletop, Dragon Strike could be the new style of game. Come on.
Yeah, well, just get out your VHS and you can play. And
I will, like, why not put it up on YouTube, you know, and sell the book and then just have those, you take the picture of them and you click the link and it brings you to the
yeah.
video. Come on, this is gold.
At least as a throwback marketing stunt, that's pretty fun.
Hey, nostalgia is in right now.
Yeah, for
Everything is nostalgia right now.
Yeah, Stranger
they've got all-
Things.
Yeah, they've got all these mugs of like old first edition artwork, the old classic style, like sword and sorcery style artwork I've seen. That's like part of the merchandising now. So it's all nostalgia is in.
yeah, but what's going to happen in 20 years when we're all dead, and then what's going to be nostalgia? That's what I wonder. It's like,
Will be nostalgia for the nostalgia.
no, seriously. I'm like, I mean, it's interesting. I said this on the show a couple weeks ago. So I there was a weekend where I went to a wedding and a bat mitzvah, one right after another, and in both of them, they were playing 80s music, and I'm sitting there, okay. The wedding was for people in their mid-20s. They're playing 80s music. The bat mitzvah was for a girl literally turning 13. They're still playing 80s music. Now, of course, there's a little bit mixed in there, a little bit modern, but not that much. It was probably 80% 80s music, 20% everything else. And I'm just like, was that the pinnacle of fun dance music and fun, goofy music? Which I think it was, by the way.
I think it's just the society is way more disparate now. Everyone has their own Spotify playlist, so no one's listening to the same music. That was like the end of pop culture.
But wait, this is the thing. Okay, at the bat mitzvah with 12-year-olds, they knew all the words, and I was just fascinated watching this. I was like, wow, this is what I grew up on, and they know it all. They know it all. They knew all
Maybe
the
Googled
words.
Maybe they Googled it.
But no, but you know what I mean. Like they were there singing and dancing to it. I was like, "Is this it? Is this the pinnacle? It's like the '80s as good as it gets, and then everything's downhill."
How depressing would that be? That was it, then.
Right?
That was humanity.
Before
Great,
the internet
awesome,
came
sick.
along.
Yeah, amazing. That was the top.
Well, guys, I've got to run. It dawned on me. I've got to go get my wife, and she's at a different location, and I have her car.
Oh,
So-
Proving that you're not a real nerd, Byron.
I know.
Priorities would be very different if you were a real nerd.
Crash us, and then you're like, "Oh, I gotta go." Well,
I gotta go. I'm sorry.
Well, do you have to leave right this minute, or you have a few minutes?
I have 30 seconds.
That's not a few minutes.
Yeah.
Well, you could switch it back to the 3-person view, Steven.
That's true.
Switch
Well,
it back to the 3-person.
All right. Well, good thing I have a
Very
3-person
Thanks for letting me
view.
crash your stream. I'll talk to you.
Thanks for coming.
See you,
All right.
chat. Have fun, everyone.
Bye, Byron.
Bye, Byron. Well, back to the 3-person. Look at that. Wow, that
All
really
right.
that came in.
That was
That
smooth.
that was smooth.
I'll try and fill the gap that was left.
Try. You more than fill in. So, what do you think? Now you cover a lot of Games Workshop, and in my opinion, Games Workshop is just a few years ahead of where D&D might end up.
Jesus. God,
No,
I hope not.
I mean, do you disagree? I think that's pretty accurate because Games Workshop's already been through a lot of this. Like, what do you think will happen with D&D after seeing what's been happening with Games Workshop?
I think Games Workshop and WoTC are on like two very different business models. So WoTC, I guess, first of all, I think they're moving towards a more digital space. They're trying to kind of monetize. Yes. In a lot of ways, I think that's very modern, and it's been informed by the video game market and that kind of live service model that I think a lot of businesses have been moving to, as we kind of talked about earlier. And I think that's the kind of future direction that WoTC are taking, that and licensing out the IP. Games Workshop, however, I think are in a very different place. For one, they're old, right? Like as a company, they're relatively old in this space, like in nerd space, they're old. But they're still in a lot of ways, while they're making a lot of money, they think very small in terms of like where they see itself going. They like to imagine themselves as a very niche company. Whereas WoTC, I think, have this aspiration of being a very like mainstream, like sell the IP, get the maximum number of people in. Games Workshop are still not selling PDFs. They don't sell PDFs. They only sell physical books. And they're selling a new physical book like every couple of months for like a certain faction in Warhammer. And then every 3 years, there is a new edition of Warhammer, no matter what. It doesn't matter. There is a rotating schedule. They will make a new edition no matter what. And that's their business model. Sell lots of miniatures, physical miniatures, sell lots of books, and then kind of sell the IP off to video game companies to make video games around. It's a very recent thing, this selling the IP for them. They were always very wary of it. Like 10 years ago, they did not. Well, geez, I'm getting older. Okay, so like 15 years ago, they used to really be worried about selling their IP. They were very focused on like, we got to keep the quality very high, so no one can have Warhammer. They were very, very reluctant to give it out. But then they started making loads of money from it, and they were like, oh, right, I see. So there's a reason to do this. And now they've just been handing out their IP to everybody. And in that sense, I guess they're kind of similar to WoTC, but overall, I think their outlook, their attitude towards their products is just night and day compared to WoTC. I think they really are just trying to focus on their core product of Space Marines and sell those to a certain number of people. Because the way Games Workshop work, if you're someone who's interested in Warhammer, and if you don't know, Warhammer is like a miniature war game where you buy physical little miniatures and you fight other people's physical miniatures.
I got one. You want to see mine?
Yeah.
Look. Ta-da.
Their goal is to get you in to Warhammer, buy a bunch of those, and then fuck off. Sorry, can I swear?
Sure.
And then leave, basically. They burn you out. So you'll come in, and then you'll buy all the books, you'll buy all the paints to paint the miniatures, and all the glue, and all the physical miniatures, and you'll be like, yeah, I'm really into this. And you'll buy them all, and they're really expensive. They're like $60 for 5. Yeah. And you'll buy a bunch of them. You'll spend hundreds of dollars, thousands of dollars, and then you'll just slowly get burnt out, like, because there'll be new miniatures out you'll need to buy. There'll be a new book to buy. There'll be a new rule book to buy. Like every couple of years is another thing to buy, another thing to buy. And that's how they get you. They're constantly coming back to the well. And so there's a cycle of an audience there who get into Warhammer and then leave again after a couple of years. It's a very regular cycle that Warhammer has. WoTC don't do that. I think WoTC, whenever you get into D&D, I think they want you to just stay and buy things in Dungeons and Dragons. I don't think they want people to like spend, obviously they would love it for you to just spend all the money that you have and then just leave, right? But they understand, I think, that you need to be a little bit more long-term than that. I suspect that might change.
Wouldn't like it if you just left because they need an ecosystem of people playing it to cause it to be popular so people will buy it.
It's like, imagine if everyone that played D&D was a DM, right? Because that's the thing. Like the DMs are the ones who buy all the products. For Warhammer, everyone is the DM. Everyone is buying loads of products. Proportionately, while there are way less people who play Warhammer than there are who play D&D, Warhammer is more profitable than Dungeons and Dragons. I have no doubt, because the amount of money that each individual person spends in Warhammer, and that's the Games Workshop business model: maximize profit from people who get into the hobby for the first time, usually young adult boys, young, like kind of teenager to kind of like early 20s, and then they'll leave in a couple of years and then maybe come back in their 30s and 40s. And that's when they get you with the nostalgia.
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. I completely agree, because I am, as you said, that person. That was me a few years ago, and I bought all the minis, and I bought all the paints, and I bought all those books, and then the new version came out, and I got rid of most of that because I really did it because, believe it or not, I was playing with my daughter, and she enjoyed it, and it was very relaxing. And there was a store near me, and we would go and paint, and it was just fun and relaxing, and she liked doing it. And actually, this little guy I have here, I just painted him on my own, just like for fun. It is therapeutic to sit there and paint, even if you're not great at it. But at the same time, they do license out, because in the video game world, oh my God, There is, and I bought one of those deals, and I have a solid wall of 40K games on my Steam library. You know, it's literally like 35 games, and they're all 40K. You know,
they're all very new though as well. Like it used to be that, because I remember, so like 20 years ago, right? I got into Warhammer by playing Dawn of War, which was a video game. It was like a real-time strategy game on the PC. Yep. But at the time, that was so notable for being a Warhammer game. Like there was like 4 or 5 kind of Warhammer games, and notoriously, Games Workshop were very reluctant to let anyone else play with their IP and like license it out.
Yes.
But they had like. Dawn of War was super successful. Then Total War Warhammer was super successful, and it just opened the floodgates. They realized, and each year, if you look at their annual reports now, you'll see with Games Workshop, the IP, the licensing, it's going up, and it's free money. Licensing is free money. There's no cost to licensing out your IP beyond tax. Like, why wouldn't you? Like, that's why all these companies are so obsessed with licensing out their IPs. That's why WoTC are so obsessed with it, because it's just free cash. It's, you click your fingers and you get it. Cha-ching.
Well, I will say I have a different relationship with Games Workshop because I used to play after school every day Talisman, which was Games Workshop. Oh God, I love that game. And
roll a d6, see what happens.
Oh, so good.
What a bad game.
What a great game. And we had every single expansion. We would play with all of them. That game was great because it was so horribly random. I loved it. We played it every single day after school.
I don't have a problem with randomness. Random is fun, but
it's not a game. It's not a game.
It didn't really work. Right?
I loved it.
Like one time we had a situation where one person randomly was way ahead. And okay, that's fine. That's random. So it's okay to get way ahead. They got into the middle. They really should have won because nobody else was even close. But one of the players had a combination that would allow them to infinitely go between 2 spaces that are on the map every turn.
Yep.
Yeah, and they couldn't die. And the thing from being in the middle, they couldn't kill them. If the person who was winning had gone back and killed them before going into the middle, maybe that would have been a different story. But it literally was, it wouldn't stop.
Well, I played Blood Bowl when that first came out.
Oh, yeah.
But the best game of all still, which still is a good game because I still played once in a while, is Space Hulk. That is a good game. And that game is very well made, very balanced, and very hard and very scary.
So what I think a lot of people don't know though is that Warhammer is just one game of a massive market of war games. Like I think a lot of people don't know that. It's kind of like the role-playing game marketplace with Dungeons and Dragons, where there's this big IP that everyone knows, and then the moment you step beyond that, you're like, oh my God, there's like hundreds of other games. You know, there's Pathfinder, there's Call of Cthulhu. The same thing is true of like wargaming, except that I think that because Games Workshop are extremely expensive to buy into, people don't venture beyond Warhammer into the wider wargaming market. But it exists as well. Like there's loads of games that aren't just Warhammer 40K, you know. There's like historical games, there's other sci-fi games, there are a lot of fantasy games. Like there are hundreds. Like I play a lot of them. I've literally been painting pirates for a game called Blood and Plunder recently, where you actually have pirate ships and shoot at each other with cannons. Like there's a lot of experiences, and all of them are cheaper. Like all of them are cheaper than Warhammer. But Warhammer imagine if Dungeons and Dragons was the only RPG that most people have heard of, and also to buy into Dungeons and Dragons, you had to spend at least like $300, $400, $500. And people so already you're limiting the number of people who are going to try out role-playing games if that's your price point to buy in. But then they're also not going to try on another game if they think that other games are going to be at like $300 to buy into as well. That's like the big problem. Like there's this debate in RPGs of whether or not Dungeons and Dragons like attract enough people, you know, whether or not people get trapped in Dungeons and Dragons and don't want to play other games. With wargaming, that is a problem. Like that's a massive issue where people play Warhammer and don't try anything else.
That makes sense because it's just the barrier to entry is very high. For Warhammer, for any war game, it's higher. Whereas with Dungeons and Dragons, you buy the player's handbook. And then if you want to buy into another RPG, you could probably do that and it wouldn't cost that much either. And so it's easier. even so, many people who are mainly D&D players are only D&D players. Whereas once somebody plays even one other RPG, they're more likely to play multiple RPGs.
Yeah, I can. So have you done like research or anything? Like I'm sure Paizo has got some deets, some files somewhere, right, on like whether or not like they've done some market research on people who play Pathfinder 2. Right, and like whether or not you're just just a Dungeons and Dragons player, like I have to imagine it is true that the moment you try a different game, you're just way more likely to try other games too. You suddenly think of yourself as a variety gamer.
I mean, anecdotally, it seems like if you talk to a lot of people, if they are in other fan bases than D&D, they're usually someone who is more likely to have tried out multiple games. Now, that could be because the two multiple games they tried out were D&D and then whatever other game it was, right? Because they came in on D&D. So it's not necessarily telling the whole story, but it is like, right? The fact that D&D is larger and has some people only tried them doesn't mean that like there's this different subset who didn't play D&D. It could just mean that this smaller subset who play multiple came from D&D first in a lot of cases.
Honestly, I actually feel a little bit. I feel like almost lucky that my first RPG wasn't Dungeons and Dragons.
What was
I was
yours?
never like. It was Dark Heresy, which is it's a Warhammer 40k RPG. Because I went from Warhammer into role playing games, so I took a very weird kind of like circuitous path into role playing. So I didn't play Dungeons and Dragons until I'd already been role playing for like 7 years. Then I tried Dungeons and Dragons. I played Pathfinder first before I played Dungeons and Dragons. Although admittedly, that was first edition Pathfinder, which when it was sold to me as, oh, this is Dungeons and Dragons. It's like, why is it called Pathfinder? It's basically Dungeons and Dragons.
Pretty similar.
Yeah.
First edition. It's pretty similar. Listen.
Yeah.
I
was
wrote for
edition
first edition
D&D at the time, right? So everyone was like, don't worry about 4th edition, just play Pathfinder.
You know, sometimes playing different TTRPGs as your first one can teach you different lessons and improve different skills than people would normally have if their first one was Dungeons and Dragons or Pathfinder or something like that. Like, I've always thought that people who come in with a sort of a fail forward system or a system where you have to fail at certain things to advance, like Burning Wheel, might have a different mindset than ones where like failure is bad and it can stop you in your tracks and you just never want to fail. They might be more willing to role play out failing on purpose.
Yeah, like I think that's 100% true. Like there's definitely what I see as Dungeons and Dragons brain, which is people who have only ever played Dungeons and Dragons and then they go into another RPG that is kind of different, that has a different premise and different expectations on players. Like say maybe it's like Call of Cthulhu, which is a horror game where if you open the wrong door, you could just get killed like it's nothing, you know? And there's people who come in to Call of Cthulhu from Dungeons and Dragons and they might ask questions like, well, who's the party tank? It's like you're playing investigators in 1920s Louisiana. There is no tank. There is no like gameplay role, right? Like you're investigating things. Like it's not. There's just a completely different gameplay loop. It doesn't use the same assumptions, you know, because people get they get kind of they learn the culture of Dungeons and Dragons. They learn the kind of expectations on them, and they start to think about role playing in a certain way. And with Dungeons and Dragons, it's very gamified, so they adopt that, and it's almost like you have to unlearn some of those elements to play other games. There's like a little bit of unspooling that you have to do.
The party tank in 1920s Louisiana is an old World War I decommissioned tank that people jump into to try to escape from the Eldritch horrors, and it winds up not helping them at all.
Then they get got. Yeah.
The Hound of Tindalos comes out of the corner from inside the tank and then rips them apart.
Yeah. The first time, you try to take on Cthulhu in a Call of Cthulhu game, you learn a very valuable lesson, but your shotgun is not good enough.
So we've been going 2 hours.
Yeah.
I'll probably wrap it up, but one thing is a couple of people have asked us, Paizo just eroded the dying wounded
Yeah,
rules.
they did. I put
Any
a post on
comments?
Reddit that is now at the top of the Pathfinder 2e subreddit.
I guess there
about
is a
that.
comment that Mark made and now leads Reddit. Congratulations, Mark. What is it? What did you say in your
I
Reddit
said that
post?
they eroded.
Oh,
I just said that they eroded it.
Any opinions?
And then I asked, can this bring about a peaceful conclusion to the discourse on that topic? And the response was, "Oh, you poor naive soul," is the number one response. We're still fighting the GIF wars. That was the response. That
GIF?
was the number one response to that comment.
Wars?
Yeah, well, it could be GIF or GIF. I think that's why it's a war. I usually say GIF, but I said GIF just for this stream because I know that's supposedly the official. That's supposedly the official pronunciation that the creator of the file format created, even though I usually use GIF anyway. So I know it's not technically correct to use GIF, but that's fine.
Discourse, do you use the word data or data?
Data. I use data. Data, GIF, H.
Okay. So do you know this? I've told this story multiple times, but I'll tell it again. Do you know the story of data and how everyone else says data instead of data?
No, I have no idea. I just thought, like, I don't know, I've got a weird accent, I think, so.
Very long story short, when I was a kid, people called it data. They didn't say data, they said data. It was very common. And in some movies...
Or data.
Data
was pretty common in the US.
There was 3 versions of saying that word. And what ended up happening, even in some game, if you see some things like war games and just some movies from back then, and they do say it weird. And when Star Trek The Next Generation came out, there's the character Data. And they were like, well, how are you going to pronounce it? They asked Jean-Luc Picard. It's like, okay, how are you going to... Patrick Stewart. How are you going to pronounce it?
Literally asked Jean-Luc Picard.
Well, they could have. Maybe he was in character. And anyhow, they said, how are you going to pronounce it? Because that will probably be the way everyone pronounces it forever. And he said, okay, I'll call him Data. And he did. And the rest is history. And because of that, that's how we say it. But it could have been, because they asked him, it was like, do you want to call him Data? Data? Was it the other one? Data, right? Data. It was like DADA instead of DATA.
Or no, DATA, but with an A, but
it's pronounced short Data instead of Data. And he's like, no, Data, and that's it. So now everyone says that because of that. There you go.
All right. So wow, the more you know, yeah.
The more you. That's your stream. That's what you would have. I see yours enough.
Yeah.
But I do like to see. But it's fascinating because think about Dungeons and Dragons, like video games. If you really want to get into it, everything in video games comes from Dungeons and Dragons. Everything. Levels, lives, hit points, armor class, the stats, you name it. It all comes from Dungeons and Dragons. None of that existed before D&D in video games.
But a lot of that came from chainmail.
Yeah, war game chainmail.
And chainmail was a war game.
Right.
That was based on Riksspiel, which is a 19th century game played by Prussian nobility. So really, I think we got to thank the Germans.
Okay. Well, you know what? That reminds me of, if you want to see or listen to the craziest story very similar to that, where you can go back forever, listen to 99% Invisible. Does anyone listen to that? It's a podcast. They go through the history. It's their best episode. It's something like 900 episodes. They go through the history of Who Let the Dogs Out, okay? The song Who Let the Dogs Out, you just think it's like, oh, yeah, it's a fun little song. No, it's the most convoluted, complex, crazy history, because when it came out in 2000, they were like, well, you invented it, and this guy from, like, Miami in, like, 96 was like, no, I invented it, and then he has proof. And then there's like, well, you didn't invent it. There's a guy from 1992 who's like, I invented it. And then he had proof. And then it was like, well, you didn't really invent it. There's a guy from like 1990.
Wow.
And it keeps going back forever.
Wow.
And like there's other versions. And it's like, is this it took the guy who researched it, he goes, every time I thought the story died, I found an earlier version. And
that's pretty funny.
A year of his life going through the history of Who Let the Dogs Out, and it just keeps going back. And this is the best part, they all have proof. They all have like cassette tapes or recordings from the time, and it's like, so is it that people just like that term and it just somehow is in our collective unconsciousness? Because how did all these people come up with this concept and the same tune and the same words in different locations of the world?
Well, I mean, if they all have proof that they did it in X year,
they do.
Then that just means that they have proof that they did it sooner than the later person who lied, right?
No, but
so if someone lied and said that they created it in 1996, let's say I am for some reason also a liar, but I want to have credit for it, and I'm like, wait, I definitely have a recording.
It goes back to like the 70s.
I can prove that it wasn't that guy. I can say it was me.
Yeah, but the point is, these are digital recording. These are like cassette tapes of someone who did this like in the 70s. And then there's some kids in Miami in the 90s. They had no way to know about those cassette tapes in 20 years in the past. It just happened to be that the sound was similar. And they go through it. It is insane.
That's aliens, man. Aliens. That's it. The only explanation. Yep, aliens.
Who Let the Dogs Out is like the musical version of the pyramids.
Exactly. Ancient aliens.
It is fun. Look it up. It's our most popular episode, and when you listen to it, it'll blow your brains. So you'll be
when you said you were going to talk about the history of Who Let the Dogs Out, I thought you were meant like a historical documentary of who, like the people who let the dogs out. Yeah,
no,
like
but it's the actual song. It's the song. It's like, who let the dogs out? Woof, 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 woof.
Oh man,
it's really good. There's a lot of things like that. Right. There's only so many ways you can put words together, and it comes back to like, how many ways can you say something or do something.
Steven, you sang Who Let the Dogs Out there. That's perfect because we got over 100 likes.
No,
and we had a song when
likes.
you sang Who Let the Dogs Out.
There we go. Because whenever we get 100 likes, we always do something. So,
who let the dogs out?
You're terrible. You're
there
not
you go.
good at it. I'm not going to lie anymore. I let the dogs out. That's right.
We find it. Mission accomplished, ladies and gentlemen. It's done. We got them.
We got the dogs. They're off in outer space. Yes.
I have a question, though. I'm going to be going... I'm like taking us full circle all the way back to the beginning, because I kind of passed over this, but I'm curious about this. At the very beginning, you mentioned that with Penguin House,
yes,
it wasn't. I know there's people who were like, okay, well, that sounds like the podcast is kind of over now. I'm gonna leave, in the last 2 minutes. So anyway, the actual topic, Penguin House. You were saying that it sounded like they might have been the ones that dropped.
Yes.
Wizards of the Coast.
Yes.
How certain are we on this on a scale of like 1 to 10? Because WoTC were pretty clear. Like when it first broke, that WoTC and Penguin House were kind of Hasbro and Penguin.
I'd say 50%. I'd say 50%. Yeah. I mean, it could have just been mutual. It could have been. It doesn't have to be adversarial. It could have been that, like maybe WoTC. It could have even been like, well, the books are selling okay, but they're not like doing great. And even they're like, you know what, maybe let's bring it in-house. We could do it ourselves through our current distribution channels, WoTC. And the Penguin House could be like, yeah, you know what, you're probably right. That's fine.
So that was my thinking, that was the reason why they did break up with Penguin, wasn't to move to another distributor, but was to take over the distribution themselves, because, it would save them money.
Yeah. That's what I initially thought, is that WoTC did it. But then with Steven hearing from like these sources that maybe Penguin did it, so maybe it's mutual, or maybe we don't know, and both sides are telling their friends, oh yeah, I totally broke up with them.
Yeah.
They didn't break up with me, I broke up with them. And it could be just like high school drama where they want to be the one breaking up because it makes them sound less like they were on the other side of it. That's possible too. And then in that case, it could be either way, and we just don't know because we're just hearing each side like through a telephone game.
So
what you're saying,
by the way,
is that we have to pick a side.
Death Angel Shadow says they are the distributors. Yes, but you can't have more than so. For example, if you sign with Diamond. Well, yeah, Diamond. If you sign with Diamond to be your U.S. and Canadian distributor, you can only sign with them. You can't sign with someone else. So it's the same thing. Like if you sign with Penguin to be your U.S. distributor or whatever territory, like that's it. You can't sign with someone else unless you already have an existing, like if you already have an existing relationship with, say, Alliance, who does mostly flags. then you can say, yes, well, I already have a relationship with them and I'm not dropping them. And they usually are like, okay, that's fine, because that's a small piece anyhow. But you can't have like 5 distributors for the same Barnes and Nobles, like you can only have one. So now keep in mind, WoTC distributes their own games and products. Like they do have the wherewithal to distribute. And supposedly, what I also heard from other people when this happened is that they were already getting into big box stores and like the Walmarts and Kmarts and Marts of the world with their products and games and Monopoly sets and all that. And they were just going to bundle their D&D books in with those and just sort of like ship them all together. So instead of having one distributor for books and one distributor for games, they'll just distribute everything together. And to be honest, Barnes & Nobles does have games now, so it's not out of the question that like maybe 20 years ago or 10 years ago, it's like, well, Barnes & Noble doesn't have games. Like, that sounds ridiculous. Why would they do that? It's like, well, they do have games. They have a lot of games actually now. So, and they have, WoTC games and they have Hasbro games. So that does make sense that they can just ship them together instead of having to have 2 different companies. So the long answer is, who knows what their true story is? But the short answer is, I am curious because there's all signs point to Dungeons and Dragons shrinking, which, to be fair, they are releasing a new version, and whenever you announce a new version, the old version suffers. End of story. They can call it 5th edition all they want, but I guarantee there's people out there waiting to buy product because they're like, well, if they're coming up with a new version 2024, anyhow, I'm just going to wait. Heck, I even do that, I do it all the time, it's like, all right, if they come out with a new version, I'm just going to wait for the new version. I'm not going to spend money on the old one. I don't even know if I'm going to use it. And I suspect
that one of the reasons why they've been so like squirrely about this new edition being a new edition and compatible, it was to try and avoid all those lost sales, right?
Right. And so...
Yeah, they don't want the products in the meantime to just suddenly go away.
Right.
Yeah.
So who knows? Like maybe, I have a feeling it's a little bit of everything. I have a feeling the D&D Beyond cancellations did not help. I don't care what they say. And those people ain't coming back. Okay. There's a lot of people who left it. I know a lot of those people and they did not renew and they're gone forever. And these people were like legendary. They were like the originator, like Foundry badges. They were like the very first ones. So that's lost income forever.
Well, they were power users, right? Is what the kind of the actual industry term would be for them. Yeah.
And these guys, and they left and they're not coming back. So that's lost income. You have a new version coming out. So people are maybe not going to be buying because they want to wait for the new version. You have all the bad news that keeps coming out. And quite frankly, you're seeing a lot of people in lots of other industries, like, after the pandemic, they're moving on and like trying out new things and doing things they might not have done before. And like they're not the only industry kind of hurting. You have movies that are hurting. You have TV that's hurting. You have
Warhammer. Warhammer's the same way. It had a massive huge burst of interest during COVID. And then it's just gone.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's interesting. I wouldn't have thought people would be able to play Warhammer as much during COVID because you'd have to like go out to a place where
no one plays Warhammer.
Oh, I see. They just wanted to paint them during COVID because they were locked in the room.
They buy the miniatures. The game is aspirational. So you're like, I got to buy all these minis because one day I'm going to play with them. But at first I got to paint them all. And then you like paint like 5 Space Marines. And then you go, you know what? That's me done.
Fair enough.
You never play the game.
So
because it's like really laborious and hard to paint.
Warhammer is the Peloton of your house. It's the home exercise equipment of TTRP of geekdom.
Yeah, it's the better you. If you were perfect, you would have all these shelves filled with armies, all fully painted, and you'd be out every weekend like having a game. But alas. That is Warhammer, and there was a huge burst of interest across pandemic, and they made more money than they've ever made before, and they had a huge burst of interest. Loads of community grew massively, and now that we're over the pandemic, there's a new edition of the game out, and interest has subsided.
Well, there you go. I mean, you would know. I do watch your shows on that. I'm not necessarily up on the latest on the world of Warhammer, but I am curious to always hear what's going on in other worlds of geekdom.
Yeah. As a gamer who does not paint and is terrible at painting, but likes playing games, it explains why I guess I never got into Warhammer if the painting is the real thing and the game is only aspirational.
Yeah, most people just paint the minis and then the game. To be honest, like the Warhammer 40k, the game is one of the weakest war games that are around. Like it's like mechanically, it's not super interesting. There was a lot of better war games, but everyone's buying Warhammer for the minis and because the universe is so cool and the IP is so interesting, right?
Well, that's what I think D&D wants to become, because obviously every single book that they come out with now is related to a character or an IP or something that they get. It's not just a dragon book, it's always going to be Fitzbin's Dragon's book. It always has to have some IP associated with it constantly.
Just make a new class, put it in a book. I will buy the book for the new class. There.
They will not put out a new class. They're weird about that. I don't know why. They did not want to seem to. Well, I know why. I won't get into that's a whole other show. But
classes have a big space in people's psyche, and therefore they require a lot of design and iteration. And so I can see why they might be reticent to just phone those in. They would want to put a lot of effort into classes, and they may not have had the time and resources to do so, because each class is a big deal. It's sort of your identity in the game is that character who is in that class. And so when you adjust it or when you mess up with it and you need to change it, it can actually make people feel like tinkering with it is actually like going into like their identity partially because of their character. And so I can see why classes too quickly. Even so, they definitely put them out at a slower rate than you would expect that they might have been able to.
All right.
Everything's a subclass now. Like whenever, the idea, and there's subclasses that could have sustained a class. Well,
I also think they put out fire and forget. Like they put out an adventure, they're done with the adventure. They don't need to worry.
If they
about
wanted to phone it in and just make money, I think they would. They could just put out classes that were half baked.
Oh yeah,
and classes definitely sell books. So the fact that they didn't at least suggest that there's someone on there who's like, no, they take resources to do right, and who's able to convince the executives not to like demand, oh, well, we've seen the classes sell books, so we demand 2 classes in every book. Even the adventure, yes. And right? There's at least some inter-level person who's able to stop those kind of demands and be like, listen, it takes resources to do that at the very minimum.
Well, I'll tell you, there's a Battle Zoo class.
There is a Battle Zoo class book. Eldamon Trainer and Elemental Avatar are coming in Eldamon, and they take a. Let me tell you, they took a ton of resources to get that right. And we've had a play test for at this point almost 6 months, I think, to get all 13 of those elemental play styles working.
Yeah, it is very complex. And so you get it now. Battle Zoo Eldamon. You can play Elemental Avatar, which is, basically like a airbender. And you can play a Eldamon Trainer, which is, Pokemon, but Eldamon.
Or Digimon, or any of your favorite monster trainers
that you like. And it works.
Any of the mons, all the mons.
All the mons.
It's all the mons.
It works in everything. We're making it kind of system agnostic. It can work in almost any game.
It has rules for the system, but you could adjust it to another system.
Yep.
A lot of the lore and the monsters, you can just bring them over.
Could I play them in my Call of Cthulhu game set in the 1920s?
Yes.
You could.
Yes,
in fact, I think that if you had a chipper squirrelash fire squirrel trying to collect things in the 1920s, it's like, oh boy, guys, I collected this ancient tome. It says Necronomicon on it.
Dude,
and then everybody Squirrelash, what are you doing?
We do not fool around here. We're the exact opposite. That's why it was so hard to do. It's not only does this thing work, but it can work for science fiction, work for fantasy, work for Western, work for cartoons. It doesn't matter. It'll work.
Obviously, the classes don't work. But the Eldamon themselves,
the
you can just
Eldamon and
insert
collecting
somewhere.
and all that works in any system, any game.
Damn.
As long as you can roll a D100 or D20 chart or something like
Dude,
that.
It would work in the middle of a Warhammer 40k battle.
As long as you brought the dice to roll a table to see if their Eldamon are there, you could do it.
Completely work.
Obviously, some games don't normally have those dice, so you might not have them on hand.
You could be in the middle of a battle, and then suddenly there's like someone's on fire, and then suddenly you see Squirrelash jump out of the guy on fire. Yeah, and you're like, oh, I'm going to collect them. I'm going to befriend him because I need a Squirrelash. And you see, like this guy here, he's like, oh, he jumped out of that guy on fire. Okay, my buddy died, but I got a new pet. Oh, totally works.
Why? Wild. Well, where would I buy such a thing if I were still?
You can't buy that plushie.
Well, no, it'll be on
there were only
Battlesuit.com. It was originally just for the Kickstarter, but it will be on Battlesuit.com.
There are plushies on Battlesuit.com. Steven, is that true? That's a change of policy. I need to tell my father who wanted to buy extra, and I told him he couldn't do it.
Well, I'm going to start sending these out soon because we're going to get the books in, and then I'll be able to put the extras on the website, and then we'll see how popular they are. So.
Oh. Okay, well, I'll let him know because he was hoping to get a second set, and I was like, no, there's only the ones that were in the Kickstarter.
I didn't want to start sending them out until the backers got it, but now the backers.
Yeah, no, that makes sense because if you ran out without enough for the backers, that would be chaos.
Well, yeah, tell me about it.
And not the Warhammer 40k like good kind of chaos that's caused by evil demon friends.
How is that good? I thought chaos is not good.
I don't know. If you like the demons, then you can be happy that there's chaos.
Hey, at least with chaos, you have a little bit of fun before the end. With the Imperium, you're just turned into factory food.
So wait, what is your what is your faction?
My faction?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I have an Imperial Guard army. I have a Sisters of Battle army. I have a Dark Eldar army. I have a Gene Stealer cult army. I have a Space Marine army now, unfortunately. Black Templar. And, I've got some Tau. I've got some Eldar. I'm trying to remember now.
You basically have everything.
Yeah, I mean, I've been playing the game for like 20 years, Like
that makes sense.
Yeah, that's the 40k. And I've got a bunch of Warhammer Fantasy, and I've got a bunch of Age of Sigmar.
No Space Orcs.
Yeah. Oh, I have some orcs. But not like a full army. I've got like an old starter box from like 2007.
How about any Harlequins?
No, I don't have a lot of Eldar. I've got a friend who's like really into Eldar, so I fight them all the time. So I've never really felt too compelled to like buy any.
Yeah, I like the Harlequins look the coolest, but they also look like the hardest to paint by far.
Yeah. Well, the trick is you can paint them any way you want. I just spray mine black, give them a quick dry brush of white, and then throw some contrast paint on them.
Oh, really? That's the rules?
Yeah.
Like, as long as they have paint on them, you don't get the penalty?
Yeah. See, I'm a gamer. I'm not a painter. I want to play the games. I want to play them. I want to play the games. So I try to get from painting to table as fast as possible, basically. What
a nightmare.
That's my goal.
I want to play a game where I can't get pre-painted minis, and they penalize you if you're well, they really hate their audience. It sounds like it's like, okay, you got to buy these minis, which are like pieces of plastic that really should cost $1, but they're going to cost $80 for this small amount of minis. And then if you play with them, you got to paint them, otherwise you get penalties. So you have to jump through 15 hoops to play our game. Which now I can see why you say. I
didn't realize that you can that if you don't paint them, you get penalties. I thought you just couldn't use them at all. I feel like being allowed to use them, but with penalties, is the worst possible option.
You lose points.
Saying that they're banned without painting is like, okay, fine, whatever. They have to be. Yeah. No, but listen, I know that's not the policy now that you've said that, but I could understand that, I guess, right? Saying that everything's fine, whether it's painted or not, I can understand that. But in what universe do you allow the unpainted ones as legal, but then give a penalty? That's just like, as a game designer, why?
Oh God! Do not look at Warhammer like from a game designer perspective.
From business. Why allow them without the paint? If you want them painted, force them to be painted, right?
Because they
want you to buy their paints.
Yeah.
Yeah, but if they banned them without the paint, that would do the
They'd
same
probably
thing
make less
without
money.
like this fake false choice that you could bring them in, but you'll lose immediately because you have a
I
penalty.
don't know.
So those rules are only ever really enforced in the tournaments. With like a casual game at home, you're just going to play with your miniatures, even if they're unpainted, you know? They say that still, like they still have like, you lose 10 points if you don't have them painted, but everyone just ignores that. If you're like playing at home, you know? Yeah. And the reason why, by the way, like I think that the pricing from Games Workshop is incredibly cynical. Like you said, it costs them like less than $1 for a sprue of hard plastic miniatures that they then sell for like $30-$60. It's very cynical. And other companies, by the way, other war game companies don't do that. Other war game companies will sell them for like a fraction of the price of Warhammer. So it is just Games Workshop really who do kind of do this, and a couple of other companies. But in terms of the painting, I don't think that's cynical. Like that is fun. Like customizing your own models and getting to like color the, you know, the paint scheme. Like, you know, like my Sisters of Battle, I've got like a purple color scheme, and that's like mine. And that's really cool. You get that sense of ownership over your miniatures. And the whole thing about wargaming is so much of it's about spectacle. So much of it's about like, I've got this big table filled with like terrain, and it's something that a board game can't do, right? You know, where you've got these really beautiful miniatures like going up against one another. It's just that's really cool. That's an experience.
All right. Well, I gotta feed my dogs because they're
All right.
wondering who.
I gotta feed myself.
Well,
Yeah, me too.
Who let the dogs out? I gotta go let the dogs out. So
There you go. All right.
Well,
Wow.
Thanks for watching, everybody.
I hope we answered some questions and taught you all about whatever the heck we talked about today, because there was a lot of topics.
Which is the WoTC Penguin Random House breakup. What really happened?
Which ended up being
We don't know. We don't know.
5% of our
We'll never
discussion
know.
in the end.
Well, we did get some cool stories about Pearl Jam. So
Hey man.
Yep. And the Wu-Tang Clan
And the
taking
Wu-Tang
only
Clan.
cash.
Yeah, we talked about a whole bunch of things. But I was glad you finally were able to make it, because I always ask you and you're always busy, and now finally you aren't.
yeah.
Did it.
And then Baron like crashed us. He's like, "Oh, I'm joining now." I was like,
This
"Oh."
guy, like he always has to be in the spotlight. I'm telling you.
He's like, "Let me in." I was like, "Okay, I guess so."
Well, you could have said not by the hair of my chinny chin chin, I guess. And then it would have been the Three Little Pigs.
It wasn't so
Yeah.
bad. It wasn't so bad. Now, I just
It
gotta
wasn't
make
so
a-
bad.
I got to make a 5-person layout
There you go.
one day. And
Yeah.
do check out the Kickstarter. You get, people are asking, do we still get the animated token? Yeah, you get the animated tokens. You get the animated token. Look at those tokens. Look at them animate. Can't do that.
We're making
in
our way up to the
Warhammer.
ice golem. We
Can't
just
do
need
that.
a little bit more.
Can't do that in your world of Warhammer, whatever thing. Can't do
I think you will be able
animations.
to. I think you
probably
will be able
can.
to. Yeah.
Yeah, you probably can. Well,
It'll be
we did it
3D, in
first.
fact,
We
in the
did it.
world of Dungeons and Dragons.
Well, in
Yeah.
the world of D&D,
In the world of
they're going to
Warhammer.
definitely be doing that, and they're going to upsell you. Ours, you just
yeah.
you get it part of the pledge, and you'll get 350 plus freaking animated tokens, and then
If you pledge $99 or more.
yes, if you do one of the top pledges, because 350 totokens, come on! I was originally going to do like 7, and then like 20, and then 100, and then 200. Now it's up to 300, and maybe might go up to 400 before we know. Who knows? The numbers just keep going up. People love them numbers going up.
They do.
They do. All right. Well, I look forward to seeing you do this topic on your channel, Discourse, and getting 100,000 views. And
Yeah.
I'll congratulate you now.
The Wu-Tang Clan scandal just got worse. Here it comes.
And then it's a picture of you, like with your hand on your face. And
Yeah.
the arrow going down,
Yep.
and then it's like
Wu-Tang
Wu-Tang
Clan with a big
pile of
bag,
cash.
big dollar sign, you know.
There we
I'm
go.
like, oh,
I bet
you'll
they'll
never
still-
believe.
I guarantee that would still get more views. It's like
Right.
oh, Wu-Tang scandal. What's this about? It's got to be about
It's not a
Warhammer.
scandal. It's a story from one of my former coworkers.
Well,
It's
but you make it,
it's on YouTube. It's a scandal
it's a
now.
scandal.
It's-
Oh
Everything-
no,
everything's
YouTube
a
makes everything
scandal.
a scandal.
Everything's a
Yep.
scandal on YouTube.
Yep.
And it freaking works, because I will be sitting there looking at it. It'll be like, you won't believe what they said. And I'm like, ugh. And I'm sitting there like saying to myself, "Don't click on it. Don't click on it. Don't click." I'm like, "You gotta know."
But you gotta know.
I
gotta
never
know.
click on those, but a lot of people do.
You
gotta know.
Most people do, not a lot.
Yeah.
Most. You have stronger will than I do. I'll tell you.
Mm. Oh yeah, it is the way that YouTube works now, because the algorithm kind of uses recommended feeds on your homepage, so you're kind of in competition with everybody else on your homepage, and everybody else is it's like an escalation. It's like whenever Batman shows up and the criminals turn to the Joker, you know what I mean? Like it's escalation. It's just escalating. My thinking has always been that I don't really care too much about the title. I just try to make content as good as possible, and that's my focus.
Yeah, that totally does work. But keep at it. Although I'd say both work. If you get one, you get the other. How about that? You can have both.
There you go. All right, everybody.
All right.
See you next. Wait, are we gonna do? When's Thanksgiving? It's next week.
Yeah,
is that right?
We'll do one on Wednesday.
Are we gonna do one day before Thanksgiving, Stephen?
Yeah. Because
all right, then we'll see you next week.
We have to, because that's the end of the Kickstarter. So I want to make sure we get one in before that. So
all right.
Let me know, by the way. Let me know, by the way, next time Baron's on.
So you can crash it.
I'll clear my schedule.
Guess what? Baron's on. You want to crash? You're like, yeah, I'm crashing in Baron's time this time.
I don't care. I can be in the middle of recording a video. I'll be there. All right, let's do it.
All right, well, hey, that came out of nowhere. I don't think I've ever had that. Maybe once. It's pretty rare that I have that happen, but I guess we're getting popular with a very small segment, very choice segment.
The elite.
The elite of the elite.
Mm.
All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.